Everybody ready? Live. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our January planning meeting. It's Monday, February the 26th, 2024. This day in history, in 1909, the first colored motion picture shown to the general public. In 1991, the world's first web browser is presented to the public. For those country and western fans joining us this evening, 1932 was the birthday of the late and great Johnny Cash. For those of you that are in attendance, I would remind you that your cell phones are to put on vibrate or shut off. I'd also like to tell you that this meeting is being streamed live and recorded for public viewing on the town's YouTube page. And we acknowledge that this lands on which we are gathered today is part of the ancestral land of the Chippewa, the Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples, referred to collectively as the Anishinaabe. It is through the connection of the Anishinaabe with the spirit of the land, the water, and air that we recognize their unique cultures, traditions, and values. Together as treaty people, we have a shared responsibility to act with respect for the environment that sustains all of life, protecting the future for those generations to come. Council, I would ask you if you have a declaration of pecuniary interest to declare it at the appropriate time. Clerk, do we have any delegations this evening?
No delegations, Your Worship.
Thank you. Council, direct your attention to item number 5 on your agenda. 5.1. I have a motion by Deputy Mayor McEwen, seconded by Councillor John Van Claveren, that the report by Adam Sabansky, Chief Administrative Officer, and Ella Flynn, Executive Assistant Deputy Clerk, was dated December the 4th, 2023, regarding short-term rental licensing bylaw, legal review, and cost analysis be received, and that the draft licensing bylaw with any amendments be brought back to council for consideration with a corresponding zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment at a future public meeting. Council, I would remind you, this was a motion that was on the table back on December the 11th, and we asked for it to be deferred for consideration before we proceed with it. Would you like to, there's two options here, I believe, Clerk. We can either accept it as it is, or we can ask for further new updated report that we had asked staff to prepare.
Your Worship, that is the motion for the updated report. So if council has any questions, they can speak about that now. There is a list in that report if council feels they're heading the way to approve it and move forward, questions that staff needs answered, or council can just vote for or against. It's just the new information that is on the table now that was requested.
I think that information we requested was very important. So.
Yep. So if there's any questions.
Okay, I'll open it up for questioning. I'll begin on my left. Councillor Wolbett, for you.
Well, I'll open up by saying I'm totally against this. I'm just going to make a quick statement. Totally against it. I think it's total overkill. And the reason I say that, we should have a reason. I've thought about this very carefully. I was one of the first people, the first person to bring this item to this council. Way back when I brought this, because it was an issue with a short-term rental down on the lake, and they were using the access to get to the beach that was private property. Now it's turned into 56 short-term rentals, and we've just invited a whole lot of work onto ourselves. We've invited a whole lot of expense onto ourselves. Bylaw officers, building inspectors, fire chiefs, staff time, and like it's just blown out of proportion. I also think that I don't agree with putting the owner occupied into this whatsoever. I believe that that should be taken right out if this happens to go through. Like I say, it's a whole lot of stuff invited onto us. Even in the report itself, the lawyers are talking, some of the questions are asked, the lawyers are talking about once we get involved in this, and we're doing the inspections with the building inspector, the fire chief, bylaw, now we've taken liability onto ourselves, even though in the report it says we can get the owner to sign off saying, no, the town will not be responsible. But I can tell you if something goes wrong after an inspection and there was a smoke detector missed or carbon monoxide missed or a step in the porch was missed, it will come back whether you like it or not. We will be held liable the same as the owner. That's just the way it works. The town is always named with it. And I believe, and Adam, you correct me if I'm wrong about that. But it's just blown into, to me, just totally out of perspective. You know, and I can go on and on and on, but I just think it's just overkill. And my own neighbor can rent his place out for 28 days or a month, whatever you want to call it. He can have as many cars in there. He can have as many parties in there. He can do whatever he wants just because he says, or they say it's for 30 days rather than a short-term rental for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. Like, it just doesn't add up. We're taking a group of people and we're placing a whole lot of rules and regulations around that one sector. Everybody else, or rents by the month or whatever, not included. They don't bring in building inspectors and fire chiefs and, anyway, I'm gonna stop it there, but at least I just don't want to see the owner occupy, because there's people out there that are paying their taxes from short-term rentals, because they live there and whatever the reason being, it's their income. Somebody else told me the other day, what are you trying to do? Scare people out of Plympton-Wyoming? They're coming here as contractors and looking for something for a night or two. And now you're going to start charging these $700 and stuff. A lot of these people won't be able to survive it. So that's what I have to say about it. So I won't be supporting.
Thank you, Counselor. Dr. Van Claveren.
Well, I follow, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I follow kind of a similar mindset, maybe not quite as passionate, but I thought right from the very start that there is contractors in place that are doing all this work already. They're managing hundreds of them, not just in Plympton-Wyoming, but throughout Lambton Shores and Tobermory and across the world. And they're picking up a lot of the work, expense, the systems are in place. If should there be a licensing component? I believe there should be. I think that's only good to have some kind of accountability. And there should be a modest fee for that. I'm still thinking along that line. Can I work with something like this if this seems to be the way most municipalities are doing it? Somewhat reluctantly, because I do see expenses there and the way they're broke up. Like if a homeowner, if a property owner registers a property, and then we're stepping in to do all these inspections at our cost, if I am correct. And then there's a little bit left at the end in revenue that we could put towards some things. I guess I'll hear what everybody else says. We don't hear from the planners yet. And I could maybe be convinced, but that was my thoughts right from this when we started talking about STRs. Yeah.
Sabansky.
Just for a matter of how we carry forward one way or the other this. So thank you, Councillor Wolvet and Councillor Van Claveren for your comments. So we seem to be at the comment stage, which is perfectly great. It's going to be a challenge because we have asked for very specific direction and very specific questions. However, if council doesn't support the bylaw as a whole and wants to see an alternative, those questions are kind of secondary. So clerk, if we approve the bylaw in principle, are we able then to come back in this same meeting and carry on the discussion in regards to those specific items as direction?
I agree that we want to make sure that we have the go ahead before we get the direction.
Okay. So if council continues with their general comments and discussion in regards to the proposed bylaw at this time, and they come to a conclusion that they would like to support a bylaw of some sort, once that motion is passed, we can still refine the statements that we're looking for confirmation. Thank you.
Deputy.
Yes, I'd like to support regulating these STRs. The residential areas They're not hotel areas, they're not motel areas, and that's commercial aspect. They need to be regulated, so insist on that and renting their places out, then it should be licensing them. I make it this time.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would very much agree with what Councillor Wolvet has to say on this. I think one of the biggest unfortunate parts for me in helping me decide one way or the other is the fact that over the last, I don't know however many years this has been brought up and discussed, that there was no meaningful data collected to really give us a clearer picture. Is it a couple of properties that are constantly having the problems? Is it a widespread issue across our jurisdiction? Like, there is no data to help me really understand how big or small this problem is to justify the need to go this far. I did answer all those questions on my form here, but if we're not going to them, I would definitely in general like to see a much more simplified approach to this and not so cumbersome and overbearing, considering we have very few for our population size. And when I look at other jurisdictions, most of them do not go to this in depth, and they have much bigger problems with them. But they also have a lot more bylaws to that, they can refer to than we do. So in principle, yeah, a licensing isn't a bad idea in case it's a baseline in case it does become a bigger problem. But to go this complex, I don't agree with.
Thank you. Councilor Basie?
Yes, Your Worship, agree with everybody so far. Because I think we do need to regulate it. That's what we started this whole thing out as, is trying to protect the guy next door. He's not the one making the money. He's not the one paying his mortgage with it, but he's the one living with it. After all the questions answered from the lawyer, which was basically took out everything that we wanted to see in it. Legally, we can't do this, legally that. I can see why this is in depth because we don't have the bylaws for overlapping. So all the loopholes. The guy's not paying us anything after Kern goes out and gives him his fine and everything else. There's a loophole. Well, he's not paying it. So the questions we wanted answered at the very beginning, this doesn't solve it. It's not gonna make the guy happy. It's not gonna make the neighborhood happy. And the people that own it aren't gonna be happy. So we must be doing something, right? We got everybody mad at us. The more I've read in, as we go along in this, I'm back to Nettie's owner operator and that's it. That's where I'm at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bozier?
Your Worship, I am of the mindset that I think no matter what, I don't think status quo is the appropriate answer. So I think if we decide to say no to this proposal or whatever direction council decides to go, and I don't think staying status quo is the best way forward either. There's a reason why we're in this position talking about it. And with that being said, I guess I personally see three paths forward. You have something like they've built, answer the questions and see if we can refine it a little bit. Or B, understand that there's a lot of tweaks that might need to be done here. So let's revert back to a really basic registration program. It's not licensing, it's registering as a short-term rental, owner's name, contact information, address of the short-term rental. That at least opens a door to track complaints that council or that staff are getting. So
we can revert back to that, or B, again, like Councilor Bailey just said. Maybe owner occupied only is what our specific municipality requires to. It's gonna be a competing interest no matter what. We're gonna have real estate investors who want to operate short-term rentals, people who own cottages that want to operate short-term rentals. And then we're gonna have the opposite side where it's folks who don't rent out their home or cottage. So no matter what decision we do, there's gonna be competing interests. So it's trying to figure out what's best for our municipality. And those are the three options that I see as a path forward. So if we want to go down a licensing program, let's start registration. If we want to just go straight to owner occupied, I don't think we can do status quo. It's my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Bojan. I guess I have to agree with you, Councilor Bojan. I don't think we can stand status quo. I think we've had too many issues, too many concerns that have been brought forth. We have to start somewhere. Council, I guess, any further discussion before we decide which direction we're gonna go on this? Councilor Willett?
But just one other thing, you know, I remember having the people in here, having the public in here, and a lot of them they didn't want short-term rentals of any kind in residential areas. That was probably one of the number one things they talked about. And obviously, and especially commercial, people talked about people that are renting out these short-term rentals should be classified as commercial. Because some of them are renting them out at, I don't know the exact figure, but quite a few $100s a night. And obviously big income. And then I think it was somebody here at the council said, we don't have any authority over income and proper taxes and all that kind of stuff. But I know a lot of the people want them totally eliminated out of residential areas. And I think that question was answered here by the lawyers that we can't regulate, we can't tell commercial operators that they can't have short-term rentals, nor can we tell agricultural people that they can't have short-term rentals. I think that was ruled on, if I'm not mistaken, by the lawyer. So when the people come in here and we got the complaints, and like Christian said, like, we really haven't added up all what type of complaints, how many complaints, all this kind of stuff. They wanted it dead-ended at no rentals in a residential neighborhood, which covered most of it around here, because most of that stuff out there is residential neighborhoods. So, just thinking out loud with Mr. Bojan's, some of his recommendations there. I mean, I don't, you know, something probably needs to be done, but I think we're a long ways from doing anything final. So, but registration, maybe that's the way to start. Find out who's in, who's out. Stuff like that. But the rest of it, personally, I just can't buy into it. It's just too much for 50 some short-term rentals. So, and I think we got to keep an open mind on people coming into this community looking for a place to stay. We don't want to scare them all off to Sarnia to the hotels and motels. It's kind of nice to have some income coming into Plympton-Wyoming and short-term rentals. So, I think say.
Okay, I'm gonna go to our planners that worked on this. Is there anything you wanted to add? This,
So to save the poor planners. The planners did the public consultation, they summarized the comments that we had from that, but it was transferred over to clerks and CAO for the actual licensing bylaw, so they weren't really
they've
involved
done
in
their
that.
part of it.
Yeah, they would come in if this was approved, there would need to be OPA and ZBAs
Right.
that would happen, and that would then involve them as well, but they were not necessarily involved in this.
So, and this original bylaw was developed with the basis of Lambton Shores plus a Google search of a few other bylaws in place. We took the comments that council and the public provided during many of those public information sessions and council meetings. I'll compile them into the staff report, into this licensing bylaw, being sure to address every comment that was brought up through council and the public, and that's what's before you today. It doesn't mean that this bylaw has to be approved in its current form. You can prove that we implement the bylaw, and then we can strip it down as per the suggestions that we've made through this agreement. If you find a licensing bylaw, as you see in front of you, is too restrictive, you can defeat it today. And then you can bring a secondary motion to the floor, either suggesting that we look at a owner occupied system where we only allow owner occupied, or that we have a registration program versus a licensing program. So those are a few options. Status quo is also an option. However, I've heard here tonight that that's not necessarily the preferred option.
Deputy?
Can you tell me what we're going to gain by registration program?
You would gain contact information at the municipal level. However, I would like to remind, if it's Airbnb, Airbnb does, and I've used the number myself, have an emergency contact. They have specifically operators that directs you, if you're an adjacent property and you have concern about Airbnb, please dial 1. And they actually get you to a live attendant who takes down the information and the concern and is supposed to be able to get to the property owner. So it may be a bit repetitive because we're only duplicating what partially already exists. I don't know if Verbo has the same process. I would hope they do. Though there is some contact information already available through Airbnbs and
Right,
other
so-
sites.
And if there's a problem out there, they just call the cops. Why would we have a registration program and they call us? What are we gonna do? I just think it's futile to have,
If we had a registration program,
registration.
we could only send our bylaw enforcement officers to ensure that they're meeting our parking bylaws. And we could call the owner and say that there's been a problem. But that would be the extent of our abilities at that point.
30 pages here of work that our planners and clerks have done. And we're just gonna disregard it.
I got the clerk and then I've got Councillor Bolge and then Councillor Van Claveren.
Just a quick thought, because owner occupied was mentioned quite a few times. I just want to be clear that if you license only owner occupied, that means every other operation is now not in conformance with our bylaw. So we would be enforcing bylaw against all those other properties. So if you have 60 properties and only 5 are owner occupied and you're licensing them, that means all those other ones are out of compliance and the enforcement would need to take place there. So that, I just want to show that picture. We're now going to be saying you are out of line, you're not licensed, you're not allowed, close down, and that's the other side of doing owner occupied.
Bolge?
Thank you, worship. Just to go off that before I forget that part too. Because I think with owner occupied only, I don't think you necessarily have to license owner. You can simply pass a bylaw that short-term rentals are only permitted in primary residences. So we don't have to have a licensing program to allow owner occupied. And what the federal government has done, whether you love or hate the federal government, is they've changed it so, or they will be changing it apparently, that if you are operating a short-term rental not in compliance with local bylaws, then you can't claim your expenses or all that stuff on your taxes. So if we go the route of owner occupied only, if that's where council goes, we don't have to license owner occupied. We just have a bylaw that says that's the only place they can operate. And if we would still have to theoretically enforce non-compliant properties, but it sounds like the federal government's going to do that themselves. Because a lot of those investment properties probably rely on all those tax claims at the end of the year.
Sure.
And then, sorry, then the other piece, going back to registration, I think the only reason I brought that forward is because I know Councilor Rodriguez mentioned data. So if you have a database of actual short-term rentals and registration, staff can at least come back and say, we've got 56 registered short-term rentals, and last summer we had issues at 12 of them. It just gives us more data if that's what council is looking for.
Councillor Van Claveren, then Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was gonna mention about the data too, and of course, the accountability. I just want to clarify between owner occupied or owner operated. We use both of those terms. Is it occupied, we were thinking, or operated?
So owner occupied means the owner is on site and lives in that dwelling or on site in an accessory dwelling. Owner operated means that the owner operator could be a kilometer down the road, 2 kilometers down the road, and then they also own a secondary property, which they rent out as a short-term rental.
Okay. So, which one were we referring to mostly here? Was it, which one, Councilor Vacy, occupied? Okay,
Is that it, Councillor?
thank you, sir. Yes.
Councillor Rodriguez?
Thank you. I was trying to write everything down before I forgot it. Okay. I would just like to point out that on this information here, there are only 6 owner occupied homes that are currently listed, 6. So we're going through a lot of effort, for only 6. And it would severely delineate the ability for short-term accommodations in our jurisdiction. It would impact the economic benefits. Again, I have stated it many times, there is constantly times throughout the year where there is a need for it. Whether it is hockey tournament, whether it is shutdowns at the plants. I know one big shutdown not too long ago where they were renting as far out as Port Franks because it just wasn't enough supply. So these people need to come in here and they need somewhere to stay. Again, we have nothing here in Plympton-Wyoming, and I shouldn't say nothing because we do have a lovely little motel at Reese's Corners. So aside from that, and we do have people that actually want to retire to this area or want to vacation here or want to have their family reunions here with their cottage. Those people aren't looking to make big money here. They're just looking to pay for their retirement. So we have to consider all those factors, not just a narrow scope. In my opinion, respectfully.
Thank you. Anything else? Ms. Flynn?
Yeah, I wanted to, you talked about complaints received so far, so to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe we've received one since the summer of 2023 to date. The ones we have received have primarily been for 1 or 2 of the same properties. The odd one might be for a different property. I would just caution if you're looking at owner occupied, you know, the 10 complaints we get a year wouldn't seem like that much versus the 50 Airbnbs that would be exempt or kicked out of the licensing program if you did go owner occupied. So I just wanted to make that warning.
Thank you.
I'd probably make another comment if I may, Mr. Mayor. We know that this particular issue is rather divisive because it has to deal with people's homes and emotions and the amount that folks invest in their home, the time they spend there. It's one of the greater investments in their life. So folks are divisive on either side. And then there's the ones that, as long as they're not impacted, that they can live a peaceful life, they're fine. So the work that our talented planning department has put in, Adam and so on, into this, I would never consider it a waste. I think we needed to see it, understand it, realize how top heavy and cumbersome it is. And that it's just not necessarily, I couldn't envision it until it's done. I couldn't see the big plan until it was so aptly put together. But so it would never be a waste. And who knows what the future holds? Maybe we'll need something fleshed out at a later date. I would never necessarily it would take a lot of convincing to convince me that a short-term rental would have to be either owner occupied or even owner operated. For all the reasons that you declared, Councilor Rodriguez. So because then we might as well just say no to any short-term rental for the minuscule amount that live there or plan to operate it. And even the ones that do operate, they still run it through the online systems to do a lot of their bookings, to handle a lot of the issues and so on. So they're almost not even owner operated. Those things are all in place. All the systems are there, the checks, the balances. Is there going to be the rarities where there's a problem sneak through? Absolutely. That of course is life, but most of these folks run great little enterprises, particularly when they're managed by professionals. And often they're the cleanest properties. Many times they're the quietest properties. I'm not necessarily trying to sell you on it. I'm just saying they provide a valuable service. And also, any residential area, there's a lot of people that are operating little enterprises out of their garage, out of the basement of their house. That we're not necessarily aware of. So it would be a shame to stifle these little enterprises that are flourishing, in my opinion. That's definitely all I got. Yeah.
Just a reminder to council that just because if say this bylaw was approved and then we went through the list and pulled things out and changed it to be more fitting, it's not set in stone forever. You could take a year once you get enforcement in place and collect more data and see how it's going and get feedback from the community. You could further refine it as it goes. Like staff could come and say, this is not working at all. We'd like to change this. It's a work in progress. I just want council to be aware that it's not a forever bylaw. Whatever they choose.
And just to add to that, we did not intend to regulate the Airbnbs. As we noted before, Ella put together the bylaw based off the public consultation, council's comments and our directions received. So we're trying to check all those items that were brought up as concerns. By doing that, a lot of items get brought up concerns. You end up with a very long bylaw. If there are items that council directly sees as too much oversight, they can be eliminated from the bylaw. If you accept it today and we answer the questions we have attached to the staff report, it doesn't mean when this comes back that you can't ask for further revisions. It pushes the can down the road further. It will mean that we probably don't get fines set into place until next cottage season, but at least we're moving forward still. So.
Thank you, Mr. Sabansky. I guess from a personal viewpoint, I can agree with a lot of the comments that have been made, but also too, I do feel that we need something in place to monitor and to also have a little bit of meat in the game. Not many of you probably get the phone calls on Sunday afternoons in the summertime when people can't get down their roads because somebody with a B&B has blocked the roads. We can't get fire trucks down, we can't get emergency vehicles. You probably don't get those phone calls either when people have 2 cottages next door to them that they've had to go over 3 times and ask people to quiet it down and have their lives threatened. So I do feel that we do need to have something in place to protect our residents. And if we didn't, we're not doing our job. So I'm not trying to sway you, I'm just trying to share with you my viewpoint from where I sit. When people are calling, scared, and need to have some assurance. It's not only for the business people that rent it, but we also have to have some consideration for our other residents that are affected by it as well. So I'll just leave that with you. So I guess we have a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion before we move this along, guys? Yes, Councilor.
I have a question. Is a registration system an option here? We have to, like, how does that?
The registration system is vastly different than what's before you right now. If that's the preference to council to go towards a registration, it'd probably have to defeat the motion and then pass a motion requesting that we develop a registration system, not a licensing system.
And if the motion is defeated and a motion was brought forward for a registration system, when could this be brought back and forth?
I'd have to sit down with staff, see what everyone's time allocation is over the next few months. We have a lot on our plates.
Okay, so there's no time limit.
So I think this would include a registration system, right? Licensing them. But if you chose to, as Adam said, turn it down, then they could just do a registration system. But that would, there's no timeframes on that because there is no set fines that we're trying to do. You're just asking them to give us their name and phone number.
No, my question is if this got defeated, are you not allowed to bring it up for a certain amount of
It's a
time?
totally different motion.
Okay,
Yeah, you're starting all over.
okay,
Yeah,
that's
but
what's my
this,
question.
yeah, sorry,
Yes.
yeah.
Bolger?
Thank you, Worship. I also still think there's a path here where you prove a principle, like the clerk had said, where, okay, we want something, we need a licensing program, but we're gonna have some tweaks to this, staff's gonna have to further refine it, and like Mr. Savansky just said, now we're talking following summer for fines to be ready. That's why I think there's an opportunity here to still have this in principle approved. Let's work through it. Let's not rush staff that they have to make this council happy, which takes a long time. Because we have a lot of ideas, which is good. Because we have a registration in place still to collect that data. And even though we don't have set fines for registration, you can still put an order to comply on a short-term rental that's not registered, and they still get summoned to court, and they can still face fines to the court system. That can still be done through a registration bylaw, but it at least buys us time where we're still at least tracking and doing something while we finish this and buy the time needed for staff to make this bylaw what we're looking for. I just, if we're thinking about doing a licensing program, in my opinion, there's no reason why we should shut this down completely. If there's room to approve it in principle, refine it, and register short-term rentals for this summer. That bylaw is not a complicated one because it's not a program. It's literally just a registration bylaw. Sets outline what you need, name, phone number, address, and then the boilerplate for a court order if you don't comply. Whereas this is complex, obviously, there's a lot of staff time has already been put into it. So I think you can do those two things simultaneously.
Clerk?
Not to put building services and bylaw on the spot, I just have a question, because I don't feel like there's been a lot of data, there's not a lot of complaints and not a lot of things that we haven't been able to deal with on the spot with our bylaw enforcement officers. I know that doesn't give council numbers, but it's not an overwhelming issue at all.
No, it's not like I'm sitting here going 50% of our work is this.
Yeah.
No, it's very minute. Like we've dealt with parking before.
Yep.
We've sent letters. Like, we've
In
dealt with
the
it
neighborhood, yeah, like it's been dealt with and
on demand, right? It's complaint driven and we've dealt with it.
I know that doesn't give numbers, but I just wanted to feel like we see it all the time and we know how often it's dealt with, not necessarily that council does, but with the bylaws that we have in place that we can enforce right now, that's not a big part of our calls. Yeah, it's not, as Ella said, we haven't had any complaints since the summer. Yeah, but there's still rentals in the winter, but in the summer, I don't. I don't know if I could even guess. I would say less than a dozen, half a dozen.
Than a dozen.
Yeah.
I would suggest some of them aren't even rentals. There's somebody loaning a cottage to somebody. It's not even a rental.
Or an owner having a party of their own.
Yes, a wedding, or weddings too, and people's own personal properties that seem to be some of our complaints, but if they have an event that tent or something, then fire and everybody can comment. We're able to establish the parking and establish the noise and establish open burn, and there's so many things we can build into it, but I would say less than 12 easy, Aaron.
Since we are asking current questions, just for clarifying a previous point, for someone to operate a new rental property out of a home, is that a change of use and would that then require inspection?
Yes. Depending on how it's being rented. That's part of it. Is it zoned appropriately? Like how many rooms? Are we talking about a boarding house? Are we talking about someone just staying in the basement for a certain period of time? Someone letting a room? It all just depends on, it's site specific.
Yeah.
And we need to look at each one based on the structure, the zoning. It's very site specific.
So what I was trying to get at is if someone were to do a long-term rental, there's still legislative requirements that they have to meet to rent that property. Whereas the short-term rental currently does not necessarily have that same requirements. And this bylaw is bringing some of those requirements in so that they're bringing on same obligations that they would if they're renting the property out for a long term.
But just to follow up on that, if I can, Mr. Mayor, if you rent if somebody rents your place out for 30 days, you don't send the fire chief over there to inspect it or the building inspector over there to inspect it. I appreciate what you're saying about specific. If somebody rents it out for a month, there's no fire chief goes there. There's no bylaw officer goes there. This is what makes this thing.
Not if it was a month, but if it was a rental property, there is
Really,
requirements.
getting into more commercial, but this is where the thing becomes all a balance. You know, somebody renting next door for 30 days, fill the lawn up with cars, you got none of this stuff that we're got in here.
No, I'm just speaking towards as a landlord. You
Yeah, as a
are
landlord.
required under certain legislation to meet certain requirements. We do not have those legislative requirements for short-term rentals currently. That's what that was what I was trying to get at.
But if you had the licensing, Mr. Mayor, you get the names, you'll know who your short-term rental places are. And the rest of this stuff, you don't need to do anything, in my opinion. You license them, you got the names, you got the registration. If somebody calls bylaw or somebody calls the OPP, you've got the list where they are, what they're doing, and then under existing bylaws, different it is today, my street out there fills up with cars all summer. People, you got the campgrounds there with bands and you know, the gets too noisy, the police are called and never seen parking bylaw, but that's because they're all neighbors and friendly. They don't call bylaw on each other. You know, so,
Lucky neighborhood.
yeah, I'm getting old though. I don't party anymore, so. Anyways, that's where I see it. Licensing would be, or registering would be okay.
Okay, council, we're ready to move on. Any further questions, discussions? So clerk, just for clarity, so everybody is on the same page, with this motion that we have that we deferred now.
Yep.
What can we do with it now? We can defeat it or we can
Approve it.
approve it.
Correct. And if it is approved and then council, someone on council could say, I would like to request that a registration bylaw motion be passed. So that starts now, as Councillor Bojan said, then they can run simultaneously. So that's an option, or if it's defeated, someone could make another motion with something else they request come forward for consideration. This is saying that the bylaw, whatever, if you approve it, whatever feedback you give us, would come back at a public meeting, so you get public feedback, and then that would be to have the OPA and ZBA done. That would all be done at one time, so you would still have another look at this bylaw and its final edited version.
So if we carry it today, someone still could add on a secondary motion that we create in a temporary measure, put a registration program in place. If it's carried today, we would also go through the list of questions that we're hoping to get answered to help refine the bylaw. And then we would bring back a bylaw for further consideration, which you again could modify to meet the needs of your constituents. If you defeat it, you can bring alternative motions ranging from a owner occupied system only, or a registration system only, or a hybrid thereof.
Correct. It cannot be the exact same
Okay.
product that's in front of you today, unless you get a motion of reconsideration.
But we could defeat that and come back with a second motion to say, okay, we'd like to to have a registration.
Totally different.
Period.
Yep, you're asking for a totally different
So we
program.
defeat that, we can go that way.
Council Bojan?
Are we still gonna need to do a public meeting to adjust our official plan? Because I remember Mr. Melanson said that to do anything, we need to do a public meeting with our official plan.
The registration bylaw, I'm not.
Likely because the OPA does speak to specific terms. And because those terms would have to be amended to meet whatever we choose, we would probably have to amend the OPA as well. Maybe not necessarily zoning per se, depending on the situation, but certainly the OPA would have to be adjusted to meet whatever we decide.
Through your worship, yeah, the official plan, at the moment, it does comment pretty heavily on short-term rentals, and it is a bit, based on the comments of council saying, maybe a bit more on restrictive side of what council may be looking for. So if those weren't the desired outcomes of the short-term rental, I would foresee that they would need to be taken out of the official plan, but we would need to do a zoning bylaw amendment to accommodate a registration program, to my understanding.
Bojan, answer your question.
Yeah, because I think if that's the case, whether we go with this licensing or we go with registration or go with nothing, I think we can just adjust it that we support short-term rental use in a principal residence, but may choose to further extend that through a licensing or a registration program. Like, I think that we can do no matter what way we go, but I just wanted to make sure we still have to do that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just one other little clarification, just if we approve this, we're very comfortable in just introducing it just on the registration level for now. Is that what I'm understanding?
Because I'm confused too.
So if you approve this as is, staff will continue to refine the bylaw based on your comments tonight after that. Bring it back to council for further consideration and further changes if you see fit or approval until we get it right. Once you get it right, it would be sent off to the Governor General or the Attorney General, sorry, for approval. Once the Attorney General provides those approval for the set fines, then we can lay fines. If you want to get something in place to kind of help with the process this summer, you can pass a secondary motion requiring that we develop a registration bylaw, which would simply require name, location, information, etc. And that can be used in the short term to augment what the future bylaw will look like. There will be no enforceability with the registration necessarily, except through the court system, which would only require them to register. So.
That's your question, Councilor.
Yes, thank you very much.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you. So if we pass the bylaw,
We're not passing the bylaw tonight.
oh,
You're,
maybe that's why I'm confused, because I'm like, why are we approving this bylaw? if we're gonna-
You're approving it in principle. This is, we want to do a licensing program. And we're looking for the feedback that's on the screen right now, the chart. So you'd give us that. And the motion says that staff would be taking that information, what we have as a base, and we bring it back at a meeting, public meeting, to look at the licensing bylaw, the OPA and the ZBA that are required to do it.
So that was the word I was looking for, principle.
Yeah.
We're approving in principle, which allows us to further refine it.
Yes, you're not saying that bylaw, there's not even a bylaw number attached to this. It's not
Okay.
bylaw XX of whatever is approved and in force and
Oh,
mayor clerk sign it.
that's-
No, it's saying,
So,
Yeah.
so what I want to be clear on is if we can never come to some sort of consensus, it could be scrapped down the road if that.
Absolutely.
it could even be scrapped if you approved it and you decided you didn't want it anymore, you could repeal it. If
Right,
the
which
program
is a
didn't
whole
work,
other
for
process.
sure. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
we're asking here tonight is that you endorse in principle what you see. You provide comments on that. We bring the bylaw back. Once we have the bylaw to a state that you're all comfortable with, then we undertake the public consultation. You can make further amendments after all the public consultation. And then at some point in time, we bring back a final bylaw to be passed. But that point is numerous meetings down the road at this point.
Everybody clear? Clerk, I'll be reading this one again.
Yeah.
Moved by Deputy Mayor McEwen, seconded by Councilor Van Claveren, that the report by Adam Sabansky, Chief Administrative Officer, and Ella Flynn, Executive Assistant Deputy Clerk, dated December the 4th, 2023, regarding short-term rental licensing bylaw, legal review and cost analysis be received, and that the draft licensing bylaw with any amendments brought back to council for consideration with a corresponding zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment at a future public meeting. Okay, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries.
The next one is just for the new. Yeah.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilor Vacy, seconded by Councilor Rodriguez, that the report by Ella Flynn, Executive Assistant Deputy Clerk, and Adam Sabansky, Chief Administrative Officer, dated February 13th, 2024, regarding short-term rental licensing bylaw update, legal review, and cost analysis be received. All those in favor?
Just the new report that went on today,
That's the new report.
Oh, then it'd
just
be
receiving,
received.
yeah,
Gotcha.
I know. I'm like, okay. Just receiving.
Receiving it.
Let's just see those hands again, if you don't mind, please. Carried. Thank you. Okay,
Need the directions on those items.
Yes, we need directions. On the items on the screen, Ella's going to take notes. We need to come to some sort of consensus, your worship.
okay, so let's start at the very first ones then.
Stuff to go through.
I'm going to ask council to direct your attention to the screen.
Ella, do you want
You want to
to?
run through them? Ella, take lead on them, just say what they are, then you can get all kind of coordinate everybody's viewpoint on that. Okay,
So, starting in chronological order within the bylaw, section 1, legal counsel made, comments that a few of the definitions were repetitive, vague, and duplicate concepts. So, in the bylaw, we have made, some strike throughs for definitions that, we feel aren't needed in the bylaw based on, comments from legal counsel, as well as going through the bylaw ourselves and, any other changes made if the definition no longer applied.
okay, thanks, Ella. Any comments on that? Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you. I'm not sure. You're talking about strikeouts for repetitive.
Yeah. So, to the bottom, please. Oh, bottom, that one.
Oh, sorry.
So. I can get there. I was looking, this is what the legal told us. The bylaw you were given before didn't have these changes in or out, and we need you to say, yes, we're okay with that. So Ella's asking. The duplicate definitions, is council comfortable if we remove those? Yes or no,
Okay, so we're
That's it.
specifically referring to definitions.
in that
Okay.
first box?
On this
Thank
first,
you.
is everybody in agreement that we take them out? It's a yes, so it's a yes, Ella.
So moving down, section 4.1, subsection I. At our meeting, back in October, it was noted, that that would need to be, burdensome to require people to do site plans or drawings, to scale. So we could either tweak the wording on that, so it can still be a hand-drawn drawing, just so they can outline parking spaces, egress and ingress for the building, fire alarms, so that they would have a clear understanding of the layout of the short-term rental. Or we can take it out if council doesn't feel that that's necessary for an application.
We feel we need to have that information. Council B, you okay with that?
Yeah, I don't think it has to be to scale.
No.
Right.
Just a rough drawing.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with a rough drawing?
Just go, you mentioned smoke alarms and stuff like that. Do they have to have that all in the drawings, or is that,
I would have to pull up that section to see exactly.
or would that be up to the
No.
fire chief to? They'll know the rules, won't they, when they're doing their inspection?
You would think so.
Pretty sure they would.
Yeah,
To
I
read
would-
this section word for word, it says a site plan drawn to scale and fully dimensioned of the premises, including the location, dimensions, and surfacing of parking area and all buildings or structures on the land, septic and well locations. So, a plan for fire safety is completely separate from the site plan, so my apologies for saying that.
Thank you.
Everybody's comfortable with that?
We're comfortable with the rough drawing,
With a rough drawing,
is what you're,
Yes.
Move to scale.
take out the scale aspect. Okay. Thanks, Ella. Next.
Moving on, section 5.2B spoke to occupancy. So the way the bylaw is worded right now, it allows for 2 persons per bedroom, plus an additional 2 people for a maximum of 10. And that maximum would include guests of the renter.
You gonna comment on that? Council Bojan and Council Rodriguez?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it should be specific to adults. I don't think children should be included in, if we're gonna limit capacity and occupancy. I don't think kids under 12 or something like that should count, for example, just to take that burden off families who want a vacation. In my personal opinion, we're trying to address parties, we're trying to address noise, we're trying to address over occupancy. So to me, an occupant's an occupant. We can't determine who's staying overnight or not, and neither can Bile or OPP showing up. So in my opinion, occupancy is occupancy.
Council Rodriguez?
I agree. Including guests as renters, guests on renters and occupancy does not make any sense. It wouldn't be enforceable.
This time? We agree with those comments?
Just to confirm, that would be a maximum occupancy of 10, not including those under the age of 12, and then we'll get rid of guests included in the occupancy.
So I think the word was adults rather as opposed to guests, or as opposed to occupancy, right?
I think that should be included. I think anyone on that property, that's occupancy. If a hotel room has an occupancy of 10 people, it doesn't matter if you bring over guests from next door and now you have 20. In my opinion, occupancy is occupancy, so it would be a maximum of 10 adults if you meet the bedroom requirements. Period.
So one thing that I think we may be missing is during the previous discussions, counselors brought up the fact that there could be a 5-bedroom house, which would actually increase the occupancy to 12. And so by limiting it to 10, you're limiting that 5-bedroom house to a 10 as well.
Yeah, so I think the occupancy would be 2 people per bedroom plus 2 to a maximum of 10 adults.
Total, no matter the size of the
So
door,
if you have 100 bedrooms, maximum of 10 adults.
as long as we're all clear on
That's what I'm
I know
suggesting.
there was some discussion previously on that, so.
I think if you remove that, sorry, if you could go back, Lisa. If it were moved, includes guests of the renter. So it's the that would cover that, right?
Yep.
That maximum occupants.
Could-
Just take that next line out.
We grandfather anyone in, whether it's 5-2 or 5-3? If there's, I don't know if this is even happening, but if there's a home where there's, a multitude of bedrooms and they're already having maybe 20 adults, is that something that could be explored?
The challenge then becomes parking,
Fair enough.
because if each person is a separate couple and they all drive, then you potentially could have 5 cars for a 4-bedroom.
Right.
Basie?
Yeah, just a comment. I think this is where Councilor Wolovet's getting caught up. If you're not causing any problems, there's 12 adults staying in the house. No one's gonna care. We're not gonna go out every Friday and start checking how many people are living in. Like, if there is no issues, we don't hear anything. This only comes in, like say, if there's a party going on next door and you go over and there's 20 guys living in a 10-bedroom house, we got something to shut it down with. So it's,
Unless council directs otherwise, we enforce bylaws by consent.
that's what I mean.
So
That's
once
where-
they are registered and in compliance and met all the inspections, we don't go to them again unless we get a phone call. It's how we've enforced our bylaws historically, and unless council provides direction otherwise, that's how we would enforce this bylaw.
Good with that one out?
So then moving down to 5.3 for the number of bedrooms, maximum of 4 bedrooms per STR. That was raised at one of our past meetings. So is everyone fine to just leave that, or do we want to increase it, decrease it?
Councilor Bojan?
I recommend getting rid of that, because we cover our bases. If our maximum occupancy is 2 people per bedroom plus 2 to a maximum of 10, then they can have 5 bedrooms or 6 bedrooms, because the maximum occupancy is covering it. So I think we can just get rid of any maximum number of bedrooms.
Everybody comfortable with that?
Makes sense.
Only could adversely affect the intent, so that's.
Next one is section 5.4C. Regarding landline telephones.
Councilor Basie?
I think we can just change that they have adequate 911 support. They say if they've got a landline already, they can use it. If you got good cell service, just as long as somebody can get there. It's no different than the guy next door if he hasn't got it. It's not like they're movies, but there is spots that cell phones don't work, so. I think we,
Well, there are spots that it doesn't work along the lake. So I think if you're gonna have an STR, you gotta have access to 911.
that's, and then leave it at that.
You gotta have a landline. I'd like to leave that one in.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you. So just to be clear, you can call 911. from anywhere. It's a matter of whether you choose to roam or not. We are on the lake, we are adjacent to border. There are 3 US companies that provide cell service along the lake, as well as a couple of Canadian services that are getting maxed out on their cell towers, but there's also other ways using Wi-Fi. Internet is huge, so it's not a matter of that there is no cell service, there is, and you can pick up a phone that has no plan whatsoever and dial 911. I don't think it's the responsibility of a homeowner to provide that. They don't have to in any other circumstances, even in long-term rental. So what I do think it should be under the part of the list of that you would have to have to the renter stating, that this, there is no landline service, you might need to use roaming service or keep informed. And quite frankly, a lot of people like to be off the grid and choose to go to places that are
That you can't go.
Yep, there's campgrounds, there's all kinds of things, so I don't find it necessary at all, I think it's over.
Okay, clear.
Can I ask a quick, sorry, I'm not familiar with this. Thankfully, I haven't had to call 911 in that situation. If you're roaming and on a US roaming and you call 911, are you calling Canada
Yeah,
911?
You are. Yep, you're just getting charged roaming fees, it's no different if you called your friend using roaming.
Yeah, so there's times when I've been down at the lake that I can't get anything and I have a own roam like home, like you should be able to roam and I can't do anything.
Mm.
So I don't know how that works.
We even have areas that don't have internet. We
Yeah,
hear
that's
about-
what, that's
we hear
new.
about that
Yeah.
regularly.
Yes, we have areas that don't have internet, but we also have homes, and mine would be one of them, and there's a lot of them that don't have landline availability as well. So that is a very antiquated technology that no longer exists. It's not even being used in landlines are not being put in. So it's not realistic in that sense.
I think there probably some people disagree with you on that, Counselor, but we'll move this along. Counselor Wolvett?
Yeah, I've said this before, this don't need to be in there. There's lots of people do not have landlines in their homes right now out there, lots of them. People are getting rid of them. Not putting them in, force them to putting it in. If you're the renter, if you want to tell people that look at you, you need some kind of communication or whatever, so be it, but landlines are becoming very quickly the thing of the past. I know and not all short-term rentals live out on the lake neither. They're from Wyoming here, so. Yeah, I think it should come out, but that's.
Okay, Counselor, you want it in or out? All those in favor of keeping it in? All-
I'll get out in my branch with my saw behind me.
Take it out then.
Section
Al, next.
5.4E refers to the availability of a responsible person. So as it reads right now, a short-term rental shall ensure that the responsible person is available to respond to emergencies, concerns, or contraventions of any municipal bylaw at the premises at all times, either in person or by telephone, within a period of no greater than 30 minutes from the time of contact by way of telephone by the municipality, an officer, or municipal agent.
Okay, anybody averse to leaving that in? Councilor Butler,
I
comment?
just have a question, I guess, is it sounds good to have this. I think it's important to have this. But I just don't see, as the bylaw is written right now, what the effectiveness of it is. Cause if I'm wanting to use this responsible person, it would be because my neighbor is having a party at 1 a.m. And we're not gonna be able to do anything with that. Staff aren't gonna be able to do anything with that in the moment. So I guess my question for staff is, did we consider the third party companies that offer this service. I pulled up several approved budgets, and there's programs that do 24/7 hotlines for short-term rentals, where if I call that complaint number, that hotline, it's a live operator, and they text, call, and email the responsible person in live time. And then, of course, that's where you have that 30-minute thing where they have to, did staff look into an option like that to have a purpose for this responsible person?
No, we haven't looked into that yet. We were looking for a little bit more direction on what the bylaw would entail. Able to, inform them of the amount of work that we do to. That's what we do.
Because I mean, like I said, it sounds good to have in there, but I don't think we're, as of right now, we wouldn't be doing anything with it. So that's my biggest hesitancy there is that.
Deputy?
Yeah, I think that was mentioned about that service being available, but it never was followed up on.
Right.
Like we didn't direct staff to go ahead and,
Because we're kind of waiting to see if it's in or out to know whether to go quantify those costs and bring them back. We can always bring that information back to council in your next iteration, and if you find that the cost is not worth the reactions, you can always remove that section at a later date.
And I think we keep going back to that, in my opinion, it's a cost recovery program. So for example, let's just say that that program is $4,000 a year. You can recoup that back through when you build back your license fee.
I believe, did we talk about this when we were working on this bylaw about having that bylaw enforcement would be contacting that person and expecting a response?
Yeah, so that we could
Yeah.
possibly mitigate the issue.
Before it got, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear. So it's, we get a complaint to our bylaw enforcement, they have obviously, they have contact information and they are gonna hear back from that person within 30 minutes and say, you got a problem here, and work with the owner through bylaw enforcement to deal with the issue.
And it could be something very severe, even like fire. Like if there's a fire on site, we don't know how many people could possibly be in there. It was. And then maybe we understand what the terms of the rental agreement were for the occupants of that. It was so we had contact information to be able to get a hold of them, even in emergent situations.
Counselor Rodriguez, sorry, Ojan, you finish up yours.
Yeah, that's a big burden to put on bylaw to be available 24/7 for an emergency call, though. That's my own concern. I mean, I wouldn't expect a bylaw person to have their cell phone on 24/7, if there's options out there.
I think that's part of their job, is it not?
It will be part of the job if we take it on.
Would be just one person.
If this bylaw gets passed and this is the way it's going. We have other work too, like parking bylaws and such that are being done all hours. There's enough work necessary that we're probably gonna be bringing out someone else on board for the after hours items.
I'm working on that because we don't have it right now, that's for sure.
And we do answer whatever comes in. If there's something that comes in, and even fire calls we've answered in the middle of the night if the fire chief calls us. It depends on the situation, or if we have an unsafe situation, that's part of the job. It's not like we're on call and you're paying for on call. It's usually me that gets called.
Counselor Rodriguez, then Counselor Basie.
Totally forgot what I was gonna ask.
I'll come back to you.
Counselor Basie. You forget too.
I think this is important that we have, that it makes them take responsibility as the owner. It's not the neighbor calling and 30 minutes later getting a hold of somebody. It's our bylaw guy saying, you got a party going on here. They're not listening to us. You need to be on site and deal with this. Okay, when you get your fines and everything else, you know where it's coming from. We're trying to get away from the guy in Toronto that doesn't care. He just wants the house rented and he's paying someone to look after it, and they're the issue, I believe, more than the guy that lives down the road that can walk down 3 houses and kick the people out of his house. And then the problem's solved and they're packing up and you're going home and all the neighbors are happy. So that's what, when I brought this in, that was the idea of it, was just that you got somebody standing in the front yard with you dealing with it, not the poor bylaw officer out there getting screamed at by 20 guys. We have nothing to do with it. You're the one making the money. You should be responsible for it. If it's a third party management company doing it, well, that's fine. We need somebody out here. Like I say, if there's fire, well, we need to know what we can do with this house. We need direction, or where are you gonna do with the people? It's not our responsibility, you know, to find a place for them to stay, or, you know, like, whatever. But that's what it was there for. I think we should keep it in. All I got to say about that.
Thank you. Councilor Rodriguez, did you recall what your?
Yes, I did, thank you. So, my understanding of what everybody's saying here, I just want to be clear, is that it's not necessarily when something's happening live, it's when the bylaw officer contacts you that you have 30 minutes to respond, correct?
Mhm.
So if a bylaw officer, I know I've called bylaw once and they didn't get back to me for a couple days later because there was nobody available. But so it's once they reach out, that's when you have the 30 minutes, and they would obviously use their common sense and discretionary. Be discretionary, like if you're all in a delivery room, couldn't answer the phone or something, like, it's not like, common sense for them on this, so, yeah. Is that correct then, so where I'm understanding it reads? So I'm okay with.
Councilor Van Claveren?
Question answered, sir. Thank you.
All right. So do we want it left in? Do we want it changed? All those that want it left in? Changed? It's in. Ella?
Can we still look into the costing of the third party?
Yeah, well, that,
I would like to keep it in, but also look into exploring that still.
I think this would be an opportunity if we could do that.
Thank you.
For the public.
Through you, your worship, sorry. So I know that staff were directed earlier in the meetings to look into management in terms of what that would require for a short-term rental to have to take on a manager firm. I know we looked into that and the lawyer said it was impossible. I know you're speaking specifically on the hotline. It was brought up in very early conversations. I'll take a look and see if I still have anything regarding that. But I do know it was I'm pretty sure it was a high cost. But again, it was looked at some point when, you know, various other individual, yeah, sorry. But, so it was brought up, but I do know I was in discussions with some of the companies as well, about, you know, the municipality is looking into it, but I think it was advised by legal, we couldn't make them have a management company as the primary contact, like make an individual do that. So it was looked at in a format and that's.
We're hearing loud and clear that at least want us to look at the hotline, so we'll get some pricing on that. And we'll sit down with Corinne and her staff to figure out what the cost of each option is. Again, this will be coming back in multiple forms to council. There'll be opportunities to further look into those costs.
I can send you a contact who has the costs.
Okay.
So next one is section 5.40 regarding outdoor hot tubs. This one wasn't necessarily directed by council for staff to include, but of the majority of the concerns, noise was one of them. So we thought, since we don't have a noise bylaw, any sounds that could be emitted from a rental unit, if we could at least have something in the bylaw prohibiting or the hours of which something could occur, it might be some teeth for noise concerns. We brought up at council meeting that perhaps we shouldn't include this, so just looking for your direction on if it's in or if it's out.
Council, what's your feeling on this one? Well, Councilor Rodriguez?
I am in complete disagreement with this, so whatever amenities somebody chooses to offer their renters is their choice. If we're seeking to, I don't think it's really our prerogative to try and, I'm sorry, I'm lost for the word, but control behaviors through regulation. But between the hours 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Through provincial, noise. This can be controlled through OPP. So there is provincial legislation to address that.
Any other comments? Council Wolbert.
Oh, I'd say take it out, absolutely take it out. We don't put any restrictions on anybody else in this municipality for pools and hot tubs, so why would we do it there? My neighbors have a beautiful pool and bar, and most of the time they go out there at 11 o'clock at night after their work is done, so. Yeah, there's a noise complaint or issues, and
Did they invite you?
I usually just go over.
That's another complaint. I gotta leave it in.
Trespassing. Okay, council, what's your thought? Do we leave this one in, take it out?
Out.
All those in favor of taking it out? Okay, that's it.
It's not on the chart, but, oh, never mind. Don't listen to me. So section 2.3, I is regarding, how many licenses a person can hold. Based off the feedback from legal counsel, we're not able to set a cap on, we can't. We have to be inclusive. We can't discriminate who can and cannot, fall within our bylaw. So legal counsel remove that, so that's why this is included.
All right, well, I guess we have to respect our legal counsel. Yella, next.
2.4A restricts corporations from holding a license, which we've also been told we cannot do, since it's discriminatory.
Right? Next.
So, section 4.1I and 5.6, has that the municipality be listed as additionally insured. In reaching out to insurance companies, it's not possible. So, instead, as included in the report, staff suggested that as part of the sign off, on an application, there be a little adverb about the municipality, staff and council members not be, I'll find the words for that. I'm struggling here.
We'll add an indemnification clause into the agreement instead of.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, questions on that? Okay, thank you. Ella?
Section 9 was a whole section regarding frivolous, vexatious, trivial, and bad faith matters and complaints. Legal counsel found that to be repetitive, and they recommended it be removed.
Okay.
An attempt to try and deter people from complaining and complaining and complaining because they don't like it or they don't want it. But we will gladly accept those calls and complaints.
Thank you. Anything else, Ella?
We previously discussed owner occupied short-term rentals and if they would fall within the same licensing requirements as any other style of short-term rental.
Okay, comments, Rodriguez and then. Council Wolbert.
What wasn't on this list, and I know I've voiced concerns about it, throughout this process and others, noise, restrictions. We do not have a noise bylaw, and for the same reasons that you'd be discriminatory in other ways here, to me, the same would apply to noise. You have well, we have no bylaw in place, and when noise is generally administered through a noise bylaw. There isn't one. So you can't tell some people they have to curtail the noise and not others. That's discriminatory. I'm not sure why I didn't make it to this list, because I've been and I've never really gotten a response on it. I do know, again, and I will reiterate, under provincial law, there is noise restrictions between 11 p.m. and 7 p.m. that do apply. And they apply to everyone equally.
Clerk, you get it?
Yes, I was gonna talk about the provincial noise that Councilor Rodriguez already said. Did we answer this last question? But I also just want to go really back really quickly to frivolous and vexatious. I just don't want council to think, we will take those calls. But if they become frivolous, vexatious, trivial, and bad faith, we do have ways through the ombudsman that our staff does not have to make the use of that. I don't want you to think that we'll just take whatever. There is, legal counsel felt it was overlapping because we already have those provisions in place about anything that someone calls here and complains about. But this would have had a system where it would have completely stopped them. We will take the complaints as long as they're not harassing to our staff. Just wanna make that
Thank
clear.
you. Thank you for sharing that, clerk, because I know I will personally not put up with any of our staff being harassed. I don't think the rest of the council will either. We value the work that you do very much, so we won't put up with anything.
Sorry, and then the one that Ella was speaking to, did we get direction on that, Ella? Owner occupied short-term
I
rentals.
think Councilor Wolvet had his hand up for that when he was next after council.
The owner occupied one there?
Correct.
Yeah, that was one that I had said in the past meetings that I'd like to see the owner occupied exempt from the bylaw. I don't have a problem with the registration. That's important, but I think they should be exempt. And what is there, 6 of them? I would like to see them
At the
exempt.
moment, you're right. At the moment, you're right.
Yeah.
Mr. Sabansky?
So not to change the topic, but we kind of went for noise and then we went back to
Sorry,
this.
I thought we were done.
No, we
Yeah.
still had those two.
I'm sorry, I jumped ahead.
So noise pollution is challenging because it says right in the province's guidelines that if the noise is emitted from a construction site, home, etc., to call your local municipality. If it's emitted from an industrial or a renewable energy project, contact the Ministry of the Environment. So that's where we get it. We see it all times because they'll call us on a noise complaint unless they can prove that it is causing a nuisance to the property owners. They rely on our bylaws, and if we don't have a bylaw, which they would call us out to enforce, they would not actually enforce our bylaw for us. There's nothing we can do.
So we're dealing with the noise one.
We're kind of dealing with a few at a time here.
Let's go back to the first one
Yeah.
with the noise.
Yep.
Councilor Basil.
Back to the owner operator.
No.
Stay with noise.
We're staying with noise for the moment.
Well, then, we draft up a noise bylaw and be done with it, because we're gonna need it in this anyway.
Just so everyone's aware, this is the current wording that is included for noise, since it wasn't in the staff report we received.
Certainly covers a lot of the complaints we've had.
Because right now, we can't do anything. Cause say the cops aren't gonna go, cause the last thing on their list of things to do that night are gonna be to go do a noise complaint that they know they can't do anything with. So it ain't gonna get dealt with. If it's not in this, the bylaw officer's gonna get there and he's got nothing to. Right, he's gonna go, hey, you gotta keep the noise down, and half an hour later, he'll be back there again, so. Maybe it's time we look at that. Not just for this, because if we do it for this, we gotta do it for the whole municipality anyway.
There is a charge that the OPP can lay called mischief or loss of enjoyment of your property as well. That looks at this, it's not just noise, that's bylaw that they're working on, yeah. So there is mischief and other things to fall back on. Loss of
So
enjoyment.
would mischief be under this umbrella?
Feel like those are mischief. It's their determination, right? Like, I don't know what the OPP based that on, right?
UP have ways of cutting the noise.
I'm sure if they asked nicely and you agreed, then it'd be fine. If they came every night and you kept partying and turned it up louder, then they're gonna have to some teeth, right? But there is other charges available.
Which is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
without a noise bylaw in place.
Correct. And just for history, council, since I've been here twice, has considered a noise bylaw and turned that down both times.
And I'm not suggesting we need a noise bylaw in place. I'm suggesting that we need to treat our, we have bylaws control noise. Planning.
So when we planning enforcing this, it'd be
Or whatever.
administration along with bylaw enforcement.
There's ways to control noise and you're looking at some of that in the bylaw. It's no different than if we give a special permit to they're gonna put on some bands or whatever out at Camlec. If we can put right in that provision that, hey, you stop at 11 o'clock, you know, you have your speakers faced out into the Mr. Atkinson's hayfield out there and, you know, stuff like that. So you can put that in the rules and regs around special events. So
Yes, and I would suggest it's because they're going to be making excessive noise, so you're allowing.
yeah,
It's the opposite.
you know, they put it on special events.
So I guess the issue at hand is whether or not council would like to see the noise provisions left in. And leave it, if they're left in, being enforced through bylaw enforcement. If they're removed, it would fall to the OPP to enforce legislation in regards to nuisance, loss of use of their property, et cetera.
Okay, I'm in for leaving it in.
Staff will remove the noise provisions and it will fall back to the OPP to enforce.
Yeah, our next one is the
Stay
home
on
ownership.
for one more second.
One more thing.
Yes.
Second point of it.
Yeah, 5.4 also speaks to noise, so I just want to ensure to remove that as well.
Which one, Ella?
Yeah, 5.4
To
speaks to-
ensure that the noise level is limited between 11 and 7. Or 9 AM on weekends and statutory holidays.
I would suggest that council was directing us to remove any provisions against noise production, so I would suggest that sentence would have to be removed as well.
I don't like that, but. Personal observation.
Your comments were elaborating on that 11 to 7, correct? That what the other section of the bylaw was just saying what would be considered during 11 to 7, so if council wants to remove the provisions of what's not allowed, then I would assume that 11 to 7, but you can.
Any reference to noise at this point is to be removed.
Council Bolger?
And I think the way I see it, I was more so thinking of having such a vague thing like limited between 11 and 7, because what does limited mean? When OPP or bylaw shows up, because we don't have a noise bylaw. So I think the 11 to 7 for sure, yeah, and I think all of these stuff are enforced or should be enforced by responsible hosts. But I do think that without a bylaw to point at, we can put it in the bylaw, but we don't have anything to enforce. So I don't think we have an option other than relying on OPP for nuisance complaints. Unless we do a noise bylaw, but it doesn't sound like we have done that before.
Yeah, if we leave in that nothing from 11 to 7, but have no parameters, how would our bylaw enforcement officers enforce it? And I'm not sure the Attorney General would be favorable of applying a fine to just a general. There has to be some kind of direction.
It has to be all out or
All in.
We can't, there's no in between, unfortunately.
Well, if I may, that's something that again could be in the Writers Code of Conduct or whatever, that states, you know, there are provincial, whatever. Again, it's about education of what exists for the community as a whole. Again, option.
Council Bolger?
And I think the good news too is a lot of these things, maximum occupancy tied to bedrooms, that will also help address the most common sources of noise, because the most common sources of noise is over gathering lots of people. So if we're enforcing an occupancy limit, hopefully that is still addressing this issue of nuisance parties sounds, and then if we need to look at it later on, then we certainly can.
Hypothetically, if you've limited the amount of people that are allowed to stay there, what if they invite their friends to come over and they get out in the hot tubs and hooping and hollering? Then what meat do we have to control that?
They're-
Because the neighbors are gonna be calling. Correct?
They're exceeding their occupancy limits. They are subject to a fine under the bylaw.
Or they could call the LPP
Mhm.
with noise.
Those people that are watching, listen, because we do get a lot of calls about that.
I think our current way that the mayor answers those calls is working.
I've learned, staff has showed me how to forward my phone number to certain counselors on a regular basis. Okay, so where are we at with this one, folks?
Past noise, where does that bring us to, Ella?
So moving back to occupied short-term rental, and if they would require the same licensing, all other types.
Dr. Basie?
I think this is one that we have to keep in. Only for like the inspection side of things, they're still renting it out. There's no different that they're owner occupied. They still need a fire alarm. They still, yeah, it's provincial law, but a lot of people still don't have it. We just had one not too long ago, so I think by having them register and the inspections done, it just ensures that they're falling in line with the guy that's down the street, so as much as there's probably nothing there, I think we still need to have them in the program. We don't have to charge them for it, but should be something we do. So,
Counselor Bojan?
I personally, I mean, when we look back to all the things we're trying to address, it was parking, noise, parties, safety. Chances are none of that stuff's happening at an owner occupied property. So I don't think it's necessary to have an owner occupied person. So we had someone speak to us who rents to plant workers and stuff like that, and it's in her home. I don't think they should be paying being part of a complex program that's trying to address the issues that aren't happening at owner occupied. That's just my opinion. Fire code applies to everybody anyway, no matter what. So if someone's renting an owner occupied and the smoke alarm's on the table, then they're getting fined no matter what. It's just when it comes to this program, we're trying to address certain things that came out of that public consultation. I just don't think those issues are prevalent at someone who lives in their homes.
I could agree on that, those living in the home, but those that say live in the city and have two rentals in our area, but how are they gonna handle that? Are they going to be able to be there responsible? Bill, or do you, like, there's somebody else part and they're not gonna, it's gonna take them a while to get there.
But I think owner occupied, the definition would have to be specific that owner occupied means the owner is living full-time during rentals on the property.
It's a permanent residence.
So it has to be, not only is it the permanent resident, but they're there full-time while it's being rented, I think is the key.
Should help. Okay, Counselor Rodriguez, you're next.
Yes, maybe it's the wording owner occupied, maybe it. Principal.
Read the definition of that.
The owner occupied means a short-term rental being offered in a primary dwelling where the owner is permanently residing while the premises is being used or operated as a short-term rental, or an accessory second dwelling on the same property as a primary dwelling where the owner is permanently residing while the premises is being used or operated as a short-term rental. So it'd either be a rental unit within their home that they live in, or a bunkie on the property that they live in.
Well, it's principal residence, basically.
Counselor
I,
Bill?
sorry. I just wanted to say that, I'm in favor of that being exempt. We do have fire codes, we do have all kinds of things that all of us have to abide by regardless.
They still be required to register then, just so that we have a record of which properties are operating as such. They could tell us.
I don't think that's a bad idea.
I think that would come if we table that one later.
Yeah.
Basil?
I live in the house out front. I have a bunkie out back. We're gonna let somebody rent that bunkie and stay in it, occupy it. But we've done no inspections or anything on it. But the guy that has a company doing it, we're making him get all the inspections done. That's what I'm trying to say. We're trying. What's the difference?
Principal.
And
Yeah, we don't inspect after it's built, we don't go in and inspect anybody else's principal residence.
I guess the main problem is because you're living in it, you wanna save your own life too. You would do things that you would normally do. And you can't, I don't think you could mitigate that any differently. You're always gonna have those risks.
So that's my point is why are we inspecting the other ones then?
Because there is no owner living in it. It's not a meaningful, like, you know, they're not making sure that smokes are.
Councilor Van Claveren?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These projected costs per STR, we're going to absorb them based on the $700 licensing fee. Is that how I understand it? Well, what if there was a different way to break that down? So if I was if we reduce that licensing fee and the homeowner pays for the other expenses like the fire inspection, building inspections and so on. So then it's not out of our pocket. And then the licensing fee for the owner operator, the owner resident living there, they would still have to pay for these inspections, but we could waive the inspection or the registration fee, the licensing fee rather. It's not always maybe about making money on the registration. It's mitigating our expenses as a town.
You go first.
Everybody wants to jump in.
Probably say the same thing anyway.
The only thing, we averaged out that fee.
Okay.
So some weeks, some fees, we're gonna lose money, some we're gonna gain money. So my
Yes.
worry with, if you have an owner occupied and we do have an inspection and they've thrown a 10 by 10 concrete little shed, throwing a couple cots in there, no fire extinguisher, no reasonable access and called it a day. Our chief building official is gonna be out there numerous times likely, our fire department's gonna be out there numerous times likely, doing their inspections. So the cost actually could be, if you ask them to pay per service cost, they could end up paying more if they didn't follow things correctly. They may have not known that they didn't follow things correctly. They might have just thought, oh, I can just put a small bed in there and it's okay. So it could go either way. You could be actually increasing their cost by telling them to pay per item, or you could be saving them a fair bit of money. You wouldn't know because every situation is different.
I'm not sure why we would take that exact risk though. If they're not repairs or upgrades that they need to meet code, to get a pass, these projected costs could be inaccurate if they're not doing what
Simplification
they
of the
need to do.
bylaws as a whole, instead of having to have a bylaw with set fees for services by the hourly rate, etc. Is that
Could mean more for administration. Is that what I'm hearing a bit?
could be more administration, more inspection time. It's hard to quantify a cost for each individual one and to set a per hour cost for everything could get much more complicated.
I mean, your worship,
Yes.
very similar to our building permit fee exercise we just did. It could be 9 inspections, they could not fix what they're supposed to, and they could come back 3 extra times. It could be 9 inspections and they could have everything done and everything meets the amount that we've averaged. It's a guess at this point. It could be adjusted in the future, but we do have staff administration time, which if someone hands in all their stuff and they have everything done, that's great. If whatever staff's assigned to it has to go, oh, you still are missing this. We need that. And there's a lot of staff time working on it. And then extra fire inspections and extra whatever. The money that we would, if we made any, I mean, which is a total guess, we would keep that for any legal challenges that the town needed to speak for. We're not making money on this. It would not be going into other initiatives. It would be kept for this. It's very similar to the building permit fee that we just went through.
Okay. We had a bad year with a lot of phone calls and bylaw enforcement was called out a lot. That overage would come out of that surplus, not out of taxpayers' money.
Okay.
So waiving the fees for a owner occupied, I understand the desire to do it. You would think because the occupant is on site, that they would be much more aware of, and there's much less likelihood of a bylaw infraction. However, their home may not necessarily be up to a standard which would allow for those, so you can make a pretty good argument for either way. To either reduce the fee, I have a hard time eliminating the fee if we want them to register and be a part of this, because there's still time to spend.
But I could see it where an owner occupied might have a reduced registration fee, but then they would have to, as Councilor Vacy said, they would have to do the inspections. But that would be a slam dunk in my opinion. And for their own benefit.
Just wondering how you envision that happening, like they would go directly then and request those inspections? Or
Sure,
would they'll come-
sure they're given some kind of document or inspection.
Or to
report.
say what they're required to meet?
And then that's brought in to staff as part of the project, my STR, we're ready to go, here, I got everything in order. Paid for it.
I just want to know, is it really simplifying it for them to make them do it all on their own? Rather than us having a
Well,
system that,
Sure.
yeah, I
I
don't want.
don't know if it simplifies it. I
No,
don't necessarily think we need to simplify it. I mean, it's an enterprise. And enterprises require work and effort and serious attention to detail. So I don't think we're looking to make it doable. We don't want to resist it, but these are safety inspections we're asking everybody else to do, so. I think
Yeah.
it's only
I
fair.
don't think if it's the same thing, facilitating it the same.
Well, maybe all the SGRs should pay for their own.
And we did talk about that being a per hourly basis, or like, what's the easiest way, but then are we using staff time to invoice and collect, and it becomes a whole nother
So-
administrative work, right?
So maybe the compromise is to ensure the safety of the occupants. But to ensure that we're not necessarily losing money is just a small discount for an owner occupied. That incentivize people to be on site,
Yes,
which reduces our issues with bylaw enforcement.
because multiple residences, if I have a triplex somewhere or a duplex, I have to do all my own inspections, pay for them. I'm not expecting the municipality to pay for my inspection. This is a sister to that, so. Then we're not running the risk of not getting paid.
Councilor Rodriguez?
So can it not be as simple as a checkbox that you? I guess what you're saying is a reduced fee, because the 700 includes these fees. So if you're owner occupied, you check a box and you pay a reduced fee. I mean, to me, that would be very simple. It's a set rate, obviously. It's built within 700.
Yes, it could absolutely be that simple. We'd probably want them to, sign off on a disclaimer confirming that they're owner occupied. I don't think they're costing us any less money at the front end stage. They're just likely to cause less bylaw enforcement issues down the road. So if you wanted to incentivize occupant owners by giving them a slight discount, knowing that we'll save money at bylaw enforcement down the road, a small token discount might be do that. And that way you're ensuring public safety, incentivizing occupation on site, which can lead to less bylaw enforcement concern.
Councilor Woolbach?
Once again, I think they should be totally exempt, totally exempt. I've said it before, I'm gonna say it again. I want to go back to Mr. Bojan's comments, because I think we're, once again, we've blown a lot of this way out of proportion. This is not how we started out about registering STRs and licensing STRs and sending building inspectors and on it goes. Let's get back to the basis of why we're doing this. Mr. Bojan listed them. These people that are owner occupied, we're not having problems with. I know that the individual that spoke here, they're all registered on the Airbnb, which requires the smoke detectors, the alarms, the extinguishers, and all the stuff that, John, you've mentioned about some of these professionals doing. So we're getting into a territory that I don't think personally, just me, we don't need to be getting into. You got 6 of them, owner occupied. I don't think we've had a complaint of any kind, other than somebody coming here saying they're able to pay their taxes. If you want to register them, so be it. But now we want to send building inspectors, fire inspectors into places that are trying to do a good thing and pay their taxes. Like let's keep this thing into perspective. This is what's bothering me with this whole thing. It just, and even, you know, are we discriminating against people? You rent it for 30 days, you don't have to go through all this stuff. So, you know, let's bring it back into perspective.
Thank you. I have Councillor Bojan, then Planner Burke.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm still in favor of exempting owner occupied. And just for peace of mind and going back just to the point, someone can't just put up a shed or a bunkie and throw a bed in it. Whether we have short-term rental licensing or not, they're gonna get an order to comply from the building department. It's not a habitable dwelling. So whether we have short-term rental or not, you can't just put up a shack and call it a house, call it a bedroom. So I don't think that's something we need to be worried about if we're owner occupied exemptions are happening here. Because you just can't do that whether you're doing short-term rental or not. It's gotta be habitable dwelling. It's gotta meet code.
So if we exempt owner occupied, then any complaint that we would get about occupation of a bunkie or something of that nature would end up falling to bylaw enforcement slash building. And then they would have to issue orders through the building code if they're occupying a space that they're not supposed to be occupying.
That's what would happen right,
Basis only.
On a complaint basis.
Do not look for those.
that's what would happen right now.
Burke?
For you, that's another point I was going to just state that if there is, you know, an accessory second dwelling, it would need to comply with the zoning bylaw as well as, building services. So that's kind of exactly the point I was gonna make. It would need to be considered a habitable dwelling, but they are definitely getting more popular. I guess it could just be, if someone does come and say that they're renting out their accessory second dwelling on the lot, myself or planning services or planning staff, building services, would just confirm that there was a building permitted for that property. Just a comment to throw in there.
So if council's looking to exempt owner occupied, then I would suggest that there, the clause being there that owner occupied be exempt, provided the occupant, the owner meets the conditions of the zoning bylaw, building code, official plan, and just leave it at that. And then if we get a complaint, we investigate as we normally would with any other dwelling if they're to be building a secondary dwelling.
Okay, Council, are you comfortable with that? Communication
And owner
to
occupied.
exempt owner occupied.
Bit of a break, yes.
Well, as soon as we finish this, we will, Council, unless you step up.
Okay.
So we're gonna break it shortly. but-
Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
So we are exempting owner occupied, so staff will develop a clause to be put into there with the aforementioned applicable legislation and bylaws. So I think everyone kind of nodded, they're in favor of exemptions.
Okay, so we're back to. Yeah, we did these.
We kind of combined it with the owner occupied.
This is fees in general.
Yeah. So, are we talking about?
We're specifically talking.
It was the licensing fee, not the
Fine.
set fines. We can talk about those if council has concerns with them. At the last meeting, there were concerns that the project could, or so the licensing could produce a profit. As we've said tonight already, it is all estimates and projections, so we have no real way of knowing how much this could cost the town. I think it would be better to err on the side of the higher end of a licensing fee and revisit it and drop it if we're finding a reserve is being built up too quickly. But we can follow whatever direction council gives us.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hope we don't need those to utilize that, but we go around here. Okay, I'm open for comments on this one. So we go with what the recommendation is. Rodriguez?
I would like to see it reduced a little bit, at least. Maybe a compromise of 600. I just find 700 is just a little too high, but again, it also shows the seriousness of, you know,
We are.
that the owner was serious about being invested, so I think it's a little high, but I don't know.
I know I've heard from one owner that, and they said they wouldn't have an issue with that, but that was
Yeah.
that person thing, so make that up with the issue. Councilor Bojan, you're next.
Can I just confirm with, I can't remember what the answer was. I think I probably asked is what was the $150 planning review? I know we've got administrative review, building inspection, fire inspection, and $150 planning review.
Oh, we missed that one.
And
Confirmation just went out.
so that's pulled from our comprehensive fees bylaw for a comprehensive planning review. Zoning was compliant with setbacks and parking, that zoning bylaw. That comprehensive review.
The only reason I'm confused with that or stuck on that is because we're not allowing them in certain zones. So they're allowed in every zone. And it's somebody's house. Do we need to do a comprehensive planning review for every application? I'm just wondering if that can be removed, and if staff thinks this is an issue, then we can trigger that process
Mhm.
if it's needed. If we're not restricting zoning, I'm not sure what we're looking for
Mhm.
personally.
Mhm.
So what, could you give us again what the reason behind that was, Ella?
So that fee was pulled straight out of our comprehensive fees bylaw. So we have a fee for like a zoning certificate and then the fee for a comprehensive zoning review. We didn't have anything for like a zoning inspection. The other fees seen up there are straight from the comprehensive fees bylaw. So that's where we use that $150 from, was the fees bylaw. So it's not necessarily an estimate of how many hours planning would spend. It was using a fee that's already set.
And that fee doesn't necessarily go just towards planning. That's a fee that could go to them to check off planning issues identified as part of the short-term rental. It's not just for the planners per se.
Richardson?
So, and I, excuse myself, but I wasn't involved in any of this, but I want to ask this question. So if the zoning bylaw permits short-term rentals in every residential zone, and someone can use a single-family dwelling for a short-term rental subject to getting the license, I'm not sure there's a planning aspect to it because we would have dealt with it through the zoning bylaw by saying a short-term rental is permitted here and here, subject to appropriate parking. I just not 100% sure. I mean,
They meet the zoning already. There's nothing to review. If they have to rezone the property, you're getting the planning review through the rezoning.
right, and I guess though, just thinking a little bit further, if they submit a diagram showing the appropriate parking, like the zoning bylaw only requires so much parking for a single family dwelling. Are we going to, I'm asking this out loud because I don't know, require additional parking for short-term rentals? Did we think that we were going to?
There's a set spots per occupancy, yes.
Okay, so, okay, well, you might need a planning review then, of the site plan, that's submitted, showing us all the information. If we're gonna have regulations in the zoning bylaw that's going to deal with all those, sure.
I think we deal with them through the licensing, not necessarily in the zoning bylaw.
Oh, okay, well, I guess then it.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I just didn't know how you were gonna deal with that.
Yes, Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you. It's just that we spoke to this with Mr. Mallison here, who told us that we have to follow the streets bylaw. So we can't really control parking, and whatever your driveway is what you use. So I don't think that would fall under this either, the planning review.
This bylaw is not a planning issue. It's a.
So how people,
street
how many
issue.
cars can park on a street, for example, we can't control that, because there's a streets bylaw. Right.
Traffic and parking.
Traffic and parking.
That's actually.
Sorry, traffic parking, wrong bylaw.
Motion.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, that's the advantage of having a licensing framework in place. Because I would agree, I think it's separate from planning because we're not reducing parking or anything. I think we can keep it outside of planning. But having a licensing program in place allows us to say, if you want to operate a short-term rental enterprise, I like that word, Councilor, you have to meet the minimum parking requirements in our bylaws. So if that's 2 parking spaces, if you have an occupancy of 10, then you have to have a driveway that fits 2 cars. And I don't think we need to involve a comprehensive planning process to identify that, because I don't think I think it's completely separate from planning. It's in our bylaw.
So are we hearing that we'd like to reduce the $700 suggested down to $550 to count the removal of the planning review?
Yeah, I just don't see us needing a comprehensive planning review.
We can,
Councilor Basie.
well, we can do it, and if we find we're running short, then we move the fee up. I think to get this started without too many complaints is, like say, $550, $600 is reasonable for the amount of money they're renting out a house for per night. And yeah, if we don't need the planning review, get rid of it, and if we find we need it, we put it back in.
I think it's probably better to, I don't know, but just my thought, would it not be better to set it at that figure and then take it at lower pay? Ms. Nada?
I'm worried about things like bunkies, garages being rented out, and that was the whole point, I think, when we talked about the planning review, was making sure that we were reviewing it. It was a single family dwelling and that planning had an opportunity to review it to ensure that if it was in a garage, is it really legally allowed to be in the garage? Right, it was a kind of a joint thing. It's all of us having a conversation about the application. That's all. And I know the fee, it's because it's set in our bylaw, we're required, all our fees are set by bylaw, so we have to adhere to them. If you want to subsidize it, however, and reduce the fee, that's up to you, but we're all bound by our service and fees bylaws, and that's where those come from. Like Ella had said, for the comprehensive planning review.
Councilor Wabeth?
Just to follow up on that, what's the building inspector gonna do when is he gonna go out and go around their yard and look and see if they got a bunkie, or like, why do we need planning to review it? If we're gonna send out a building inspector to see if it meets proper standards, he's gonna be looking at specifics, right?
Yes, but they're 2 different spheres of jurisdiction, just like planners can't go out and speak for building inspectors. So, and I can't speak for fire, like we all have our own acts and our own jurisdictions. We can't be doing other approvals.
So you
I'm
plan
not the
to
expert.
look and see if there's a bunkie or a garage or like I don't see what you're gonna talk about. If somebody registers and they tell, you gotta register, they gotta have a site plan, they gotta tell us what they're gonna have. We're gonna issue the license here. Why do we need planning to get involved whatsoever? I hear what you're saying too.
And that's part of, we all have our own spheres of jurisdiction, our own approvals.
So we're giving you worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, they've turned a garage into a short-term rental, a bunkie into short-term rental. And in that situation, planning would have to carry out a review that they did so in compliance with their zoning bylaw. So that's why you see it there today. It's a complicated bylaw. We're all trying to, too many moving parts. We understand that. So, but hearing from our staff, that's why that is there.
Clerk? So Rodriguez.
Just a really quick thought though, too, under planning, if although they're allowed in all zones, we could get 100 calls about the bunkie and is it allowed in a zone, and somebody and staff has to answer 100 times to say, yes, it is permitted, like. Either it's upfront or a complaint after, there could be planning involved. We just want to make sure we cover that.
Rodriguez.
I just feel it falls outside of this. I feel like anybody occupying something illegally, I mean, you're not gonna get approved for the application. Because the building inspector's gonna say you can't occupy this. It doesn't mean building code. And just like anything, like. You know, you go through the process. I don't think it needs to be here. It's when they go to planning, if they're directed to planning, then they pay their fee to planning. I just don't think it's an automatic situation here.
I can just read from the bylaw, section 4.1C is where this is getting pulled from. So, every application for a short-term rental shall include the following information. And this section says, sign off from the fire chief, chief building official, and the planning department that the property is in compliance with all applicable bylaws, regulations, and acts. The bylaws written right now, we need that sign off from planning. So, I think if we're discussing the fee and that $150, we're also in change discussing this provision as well.
Ms. Birch.
So I know earlier was mentioned about the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment. So if, and I had mentioned that, you know, if it's just a registration, you know, someone putting their name down and it may not be necessary, but I know, you know, a zoning bylaw amendment, kind of a draft has been written, and it states that short-term rentals are allowed in any residential use. I guess not any zone that permits a residential use, not just any use, so that, you know, that way in agricultural, yes, it could be there because they permit a single detached dwelling. Although the direction from council may change and that might not be, but we would want to just confirm that it is a allowed permitted use through the zoning bylaw. Now, does that, you know, constitute the planning review of the fee? I'm not sure, but just that's where I foreseen, I guess, planning's role coming in is signing off and saying everything is in compliance. But I'll as well, if that's not council's direction, then.
And to add to that, we do have numerous commercial properties, especially in our historic downtowns, which are permitted to have commercial uses downstairs and residential uses upstairs. If a property owner doesn't find a commercial tenant, what's to stop them from putting a short-term rental in that bottom unit, which would not be in compliance with our zoning bylaw? So it's not that planning isn't totally involved. It may just not be as prevalent as what the building inspector or fire chief are there for, but there are things that should be considered that may not be caught if the planners don't do a review. So is it $150 review? I don't know, but there's definitely occasional need to have the planners review this. So we brought into you a worst case scenario, and that's why the planner fees are involved.
It was not, I'm sorry, you were next.
All I was gonna suggest is, I think and Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, we do business licensing in other municipalities, and when an application's received, it goes through planning first. Is it a permitted use? Is it allowed before it goes to fire, before it goes to building? So I believe that's where we come up with it, is that it's important for planning to have that first look. If it doesn't meet planning, then it doesn't go through all the other inspections. Like, it stops, the gate stops.
So it's one more level of protection for us as well.
Yeah.
Councilor Vaizey, I believe you're next.
No, if that's the way it's gonna work, then
Councilor Bowden?
Yeah, just to clarify for Corinne, if you don't mind, so let's say I apply for a license. It goes to planning because it's residential, planning's fine. When you, or not you, but when building inspector, if it's you, shows up. I'm assuming you're looking to make sure they had, like, and there is a bunkie and they are using the bunkie as occupancy. Would you be pulling to make sure they had the permits to build it, make sure it's hooked up to everything? And if it wasn't built properly, that would be a red flag and you would know that they didn't go through the proper process?
Yeah, so they didn't divulge all the information. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We'd be looking to see how it was established. And especially if they put something down on paper and they get approved, and we've seen this before in our business licensing, you show up on site and it's something different. And then we go back to planning to have that conversation. And then we tell them what they have to do if they want to establish it. Again, working with planning.
I guess that's why I'm stuck on having $150 planning review, because we're gonna catch it
Mhm.
when building shows up. And they didn't have the permits to build it.
Council Basil?
I'm back to where I was before. Can we not have it? You know, that if planning review is necessary, extra fees will be applied and build out one or two people that are gonna trigger this. Build them separately, and then it doesn't have to be in the licensing fee. Cause there's, I don't know, 51 other people that this isn't gonna affect, but it's gonna cost them $150 a piece.
And you're asking non-planners to determine whether or not a planner review is necessary. So we'll have to interpret the information they're giving us, kind of chicken and the egg at this point.
So what are we doing with this? Planning review if required?
Then how do you, who decides whether it's required or not?
Well, what I don't understand is if we're allowing these and we're registering them and they need licenses, why do we need a planning review at all? I'm sorry, have I got something in my head that I shouldn't have?
But do we know if they're, just not hypothetically, asking the question, do we know if they meet the zone?
Well, when somebody builds something, we don't know that if they meet the zone, but if there's a problem and somebody's put living quarters in a shed and it doesn't meet the requirements, I don't think a planning review will suffice anything. Like the building inspector will have to be called, or bylaw enforcement officer will have to be called. I don't think a planning review is gonna, it's just double duty. Maybe not, like, explain to me, Lucy.
Councilor Lucy Rodriguez, go ahead. Just
Lucy
explain to me.
Rodriguez, yes.
Okay, so when you put in an address in your software here, doesn't it tell you like roll number and what zone it's in?
Sure.
So don't you find out right as soon as you put the address in? If it's in the right zone,
No,
that it's in the right zone?
it'll tell you what zoning it is, but it doesn't tell us if it's on what's on site currently. It's meeting that zoning bylaw.
No, I understand. But you know what zone it's in.
Yes, staff have access to know what zone every property is in. But again, you're asking administration staff to review an application to determine if what's being presented on a piece of paper meets that zoning bylaw.
Well, I guess I was going to the point where you said if there's a commercial building here and, you know,
The trick, if it's just a dwelling and the units are just accessory bedrooms, it's likely not a problem. You're likely never gonna have to do a planning review. If it's a building that's been severed into two without knowledge of the building department, it might not be meeting the planning. If it's now divided into two and a bunkie, we don't know if it meets the planning. If it's a commercial property and suddenly there is occupancy on the bottom, although we can visually see that and we visually know that's a problem, that is the role of the confirmed planning. So again, it's a chicken and the egg thing.
Told you, and then the clerk.
So. Something can be approved by planning, but it can't be. Chicken and egg things get in here. If it fails building. Because of planning, but it can't fan planning, planning because of building. So I can get the right planning, the planning approval. But I would never be able to get my building approval without planning. So can't we cut the middleman here, and if you get building, it means you're good. Because I'm sorry.
But if Fred goes out and sees a bunkie, she's gonna ask if it meets the planning, so, or if a garage dwelling or a basement door. It's
It's a little different.
Well, you got me on the semi-detached because there's no way building would approve a semi-detached without.
Well, not necessarily a semi, sorry, but an accessory dwelling in the basement.
ADUs are a different beast for sure.
Ms. Richardson?
Why don't we just try it for the first bit? And if we find there's not a lot of planning review going on, then you can come back after using the bylaw for a while and say, Adam will know what we've used and what we haven't. And at that time, if, we've done 2 planning reviews out of 50, then you can go, okay, well, perhaps we can go to a separate fee on all of them for planning review. If it's, the thing is, how do you know you need planning review until you review it? It is a chicken and egg. And I say, like, do it to start with and find out if that works. If it doesn't work, if we're not doing it, then we can reassess. But to eliminate, I'm starting to get a complex from you people that get planning out of this because it's just you're gonna tie things up. It's not going to. It is a review that should be done. And why not try it? See what happens. I know it's $150, but I mean, short-term rental people make lots of money on short-term. Let's not kid ourselves.
That is not true statement.
Clerk?
Have you ever tried to rent a place for 3?
May, your worship.
Not true.
Sorry.
There's the floor.
I just wanted to say 2 quick things. We work really well, planning, building. We all have our regular development reviews. We meet together, we review them. It goes to this person, they check off. It's a process we already do. This would be no different. Whether it's quick or not quick, it's a check a box, nothing's missed. Everybody's had a look at it and everybody's chicken and egg is in the right line. The other thing is, if you want to reduce the fee because you want to reduce the fee. Don't just pick the planning review as the reason you want to reduce the fee. Just reduce the fee and we'll come back to it in a year and see if we need more because we're doing a ton of planning reviews or not. Like, I think we're stuck on it being the 150 planning. Just, it's either the fee or the process works.
Thank you, Lucy.
Where were you 45 minutes ago?
I was trying to stay out of it.
Councilor Rodriguez?
In all fairness, I think this did start off with the planning review part, but the question was asked, did you want to reduce the 150? So, it's good to hear all the conversation on it because it sounds like there won't be a lot of planning reviews based on current stock. So, I would say just maybe reduce the fee by and see how it goes.
Actions necessary. If you're gonna get a planning review, it's gonna be worth time.
I was just saying on average, it doesn't sound like there's going to be a lot. So if you're collecting from
I
everybody,
see, okay.
so that's what I was.
Oh, okay.
Just a 60 fee, let's work on that. And if it doesn't go through.
Okay, we've had some great conversation on this item. There's been discussion about reducing the fee. Do you want to reduce the fee or leave it alone? All those that want to leave it alone, I need some indication here. Mr. Bulletin, you leave it alone?
That's a good question over here. I just whispered. Is this the annual fee? Because we shouldn't be paying for $150 for planning, building or fire renewals. So
Oh, good question.
I think
just 'cause I want to be here all night, I figured we'd bring it up.
Wow. Thank you for doing that.
I missed dinner.
Councilor Vaisi's missed supper now. Clerk?
with all due respect, Alex, those fees were just laid out to give us that, where do we even start?
Oh, gotcha.
I think annually, you may do the planning review at the beginning and then maybe you have fire go 10 times, like it's gonna average out, right? Like, I think we're getting stuck because we put those numbers in there rather than us just saying it's 700 to do everything. This is our guess and we'll revisit it kind of thing, right?
Well, then do it. Let's not complicate, do it. $700 and we'll do the inspection to prove your license.
It's no different than the building permit fee one. We have to go on what information we have. And a year from now, if we had a ton of reserves.
Like, Mr. Mayor, like this is getting frustrating. I really,
Think so?
like, yeah. $700, do what they have to do, because we're questioning all the rules of planning and building, and so take the chief and take the planner and take and go do what you gotta do and give them their license and charge them $700. like, we're getting into the weeds here of who's working for who, not like,
One time.
I know it's a good conversation, but come on.
Bulgin?
I agree, but I think
Mhm.
people are gonna want
Mhm.
clarity.
Yeah.
So if we're gonna do that, we need to say the application fee is X.
In this
The
case,
license fee annually is X, if that's what we're gonna do. But we can't say $700 every year, because then they're gonna ask us why. They're gonna say, well, why is it that much every year? So I think if we're gonna do that, I'm good with that, but we have to separate the costs that we have laid out here that are related to an application, separate from the administrative costs of running the program. I think if we do that, then it'll be fine.
Speak to that, Ella?
So looking at the bylaw right now, it's a new application it's an application for a new license or a renewal. So we're saying in the bylaw as it stands right now, everything that they have to submit for the very first time they get an application is what they have to submit every single time they renew. So that's getting the building inspection again, that's getting the fire inspection again. So if we want to omit those things, then a lower licensing renewal fee makes sense. But how are we to not know they haven't gone and renovated or added another bedroom? Or if smoke alarms don't have batteries in them, like. Do you really want to license something that it's been 5 years since our building inspector has gone in and seen what the property looks like? So.
I think for the safety of our municipality, I think as a good business person, they would want to be up to speed and make sure everything is safe. You would hope that anyways. Okay, let's call for a vote on this, folks. Do we want to leave it as it is, or the way that Ella has just described it for a year? All those for leaving it as Ella has laid out to us. All those in favor? 3. All those opposed? That passes. We'll leave it as it is.
Well, there's 7.
I
Like
think,
one at a time.
I think we missed a hand.
Leave it as is and we can change it next year.
Okay, so as is was Councillor Van Claveren, the Mayor McEwen, Councillor Van, Vaizey.
Oh, I missed a hand on that side for sure.
Mhm.
Oh, I thought there was only 3.
That is.
Kind of. Oh, you're a man.
I missed
No,
the,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
I missed the.
Okay, Ella, anything else on this?
I think we got through it all.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. That's been interesting. We're gonna take a 10-minute break. Personal break, for those that are watching us. We'll be returning at 7:30. Let's go for 7:30 right on.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're, thank you for those that have joined, that have waited patiently. Been with us. We're going to be going to section 5.2 on our agenda. I have a motion by Councillor Van Claveren, seconded by Councillor Wolvette, that's support by Randy Burke, planner dated February 19th, 2024, regarding the submission of zoning bylaw amendment application 3 of 2023 affecting lands known as 0 Hillsborough Road, submitted by Southside Construction Management, to be received in the bylaw 3 of 2023, in the bylaw to rezone the subject property from residential -5 bracket R5 zone, specific residential 7 1 bracket R7 1 zone be taken. It's been read 3 times. Finally passed, and the mayor and clerk be authorized to decide said bylaw accordingly. Council, for your, as a reminder, this was deferred at our last meeting, and we asked staff to come back with it. The writer of the submission is here. Ms. Burke, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
So through you, Mayor, no, you shared that, the recommendation. We were directed to meet with the developers, in which we did do so. I know that they are online as well. Through the meeting, it kind of came about that ourselves and the developer were in agreement with the staff recommended changes that were provided in the previous bylaw and the current bylaw. Because of those staff recommended changes, it did result in them doing a resubmission of 26 lots instead of 27. And that's kind of where the conversation was, and the resubmission was provided.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna go to council for questions or comments. Yes. Rodriguez.
I don't mean to interrupt the process, but I do have a general question.
Yes.
There were a lot of concerns from the public in general, and I kind of wanted to understand better as well.
Would you like to ask someone as
No, this is not,
Procedural.
it's a
procedure?
procedural.
Oh,
question.
okay, I understand that. I
Sorry.
didn't before.
Sorry. So I did require clarification. And we made a deferral at a public meeting. So I guess there's like a perception that it was a public meeting and the public meeting was deferred. So isn't the public entitled to be part of the continuation of this process? So is that discretionary? Is it part of a procedural bylaw? I just wanted a better understanding of how that works. And I guess it's.
Does planning want to speak to it, or myself, or you can?
So through you, your worship, it's my understanding, and if, correct me if I'm wrong. So it's the official plan, the county official plan that requires us to have a public meeting. We had our public meeting, so therefore we're not in requirement to have another one, but again, it's my understanding that Lisa did reach out to all of the individuals who came and spoke last time and did let them know that this was coming back forward for council consideration. Not that it was a public meeting, but that it was coming back.
And I'll just add to that. Planning Act requires we have a public meeting for zoning bylaw amendments. We had the public meeting. Now it's time for council to make a decision. If you decide to refuse it because of reasons, fine. If you decide to accept the staff recommendation, that's fine too. But we've heard from the public, we know what their concerns are. And so, you know, we talked to the consultant, they have made a small revision to the plan to, looked at the staff recommendation for the zoning bylaw, resulted in the loss of 1 lot. So that's what's being recommended council by Randy. Planning consultant is in favor of that, so it's time for a decision. We don't require another public meeting. Anyone who appeared will get a copy and ask for a copy of the notes. We'll get a copy of the council's decision. So.
So what you're saying is the public portion, the public input portion was completed?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank
How-
you.
However,
Yes.
however, we did allow people to submit correspondence.
Yeah.
Up until, like, to include in the record that that it was submitted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted clarification. It's a perception that it's a public meeting, public meeting is the first, so that was.
The public meeting was closed and adjourned.
the council's request was for more information.
Right.
So the meeting wasn't like, oh, we're just gonna pause. It was, the meeting is done. We've gone through the public consultation. But we just want some more information for council's decision making, which is coming here.
Right, thank you.
Ms. Burke, anything else on your end? Before you go to.
Not overly, again, it is designated to be developed, and we've had conversations with Public Works regarding it, and he did provide his comments as well. So overall, like Patty had said, it's council's decision.
I know we have a representative from Zelenka Mammal Limited. Jameson, you're watching us virtually as well this evening. Thank you for your patience sitting through our previous part. Council, I'm open for questions. I'm going to begin on my left. Council, let's go with Deputy Mayor. Anything from you?
Well, you start with me. Okay, let's clarify something. So right now, it's residential 5, which allows 20 units. Am I correct?
Probably correct.
They want to change it to residential 7, which allows 27.
So the recommendation is for 26.
The recommendation is for 26, and they wanted 27.
Yeah, so in the,
They have reduced it by 1, even though we wanted less density after the last meeting. Am I correct?
yes, so through you, your worship, in the previous report, staff had provided some recommendations in the zoning bylaw amendment to what the applicant originally wanted. Based on those recommendations, in which the applicant was agreeable on, it did result in them losing 1 lot. Those recommendations included, I think it's like a 13-meter frontage instead of, they had originally asked for 12, things like this. So once they actually implemented them, it came down to 26.
Yes. Well, you've answered my questions. Also, maybe Mr. De Silva would, the drainage, there's been a lot of concerns about the drainage on this property. And so it's going to go into a stormwater management pond. And then from there, explain to me where exactly it's going to go from there.
Sure, through your worship. What it'll do is it'll outlet to an existing open channel, the ravine that's there. I understand people have their concerns, but that will be subject to a permit from the St. Clair Conservation Authority. And they'll deal with any erosion control concerns during that permitting process.
Okay. So wouldn't it make sense though to get that permission and all those problems solved about drainage before we actually rezone this to 26 lots?
The actual subject parcel is not within the regulated area, only the outlet.
True, but it all goes in together. I mean, you can't, you gotta have drainage, it's gotta go somewhere, so I just find that we need to have that approved. What if they can't get approval for something like that? What happens then? This is null and void?
Given the applications that both the town and other developers have made to direct stormwater to the lake through the Drainage Act, I would suggest that there will be technical hoops that the developer has to go through, but there is likely nothing there from a technical perspective and the Conservation Authority perspective that would prohibit them from installing the channel and the outlet through the Drainage Act. It may be expensive, but that's at the risk of the developer to meet the requirements of the Conservation Authority and to go through the Drainage Act and requirements of our appointed director.
Would this be an open channel or is it an actual drain, like a pipe drain?
So it'll be a closed pipe until it gets to the channel, and even then, the Conservation Authority might require them to make part of it closed just for erosion control purposes, yeah.
Okay. I think right now, that's all the questions I have. Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Richardson, did you have something to respond on that question as well?
Yes. There is an additional approval that's necessary for these lands to proceed, which is a draft plan of vacant land condominium. At that time, and through that approval, we place all kinds of conditions on it. It's just like a subdivision. They have to satisfy all those things before they get to develop. So this isn't the last time we're going to look at drainage. This is just a preliminary look at it. All the details will be worked out through the approval of the condo, vacant land condo. So there's another whole planning step that has to go through.
Just found it interesting that like they had 27, we had quite a discussion on the density of it and we've eliminated a lot. Okay, I'm done again.
Councilor Van Claveren?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After our last meeting, which was very detailed and exhaustive, I should say, not exhausting. And very well articulated by the Hillsbury community and our planning department. I don't think I have a lot of questions, except there does seem to be some discrepancy with some of the information in some of these numerous letters here. So I'm not sure if anybody else on council will ask any of these specific questions in regards to that, but I think I do agree with our deputy mayor that all the information, Hillsborough community and our request for less density, I don't think we've met that just yet with reducing one lot. I shall leave it there, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Wolbert?
Yeah, just to reflect on the things that my fellow councilors have talked about here already. I mean, it's always drainage issues, especially out along the lake and the bluff out there, and certainly the ravine. We run into big problems here at this council on erosion in these ravines, so I have no idea what they're gonna do at the ravine level to stop that, but I thought I had read in here that Conservation Authority wasn't going to get involved, but that's in these comments that we just got here just at 4:30 or whatever. So, you know, there's lots of things in here and I have no idea what a lot of these rules are, but some of them talking about these condominiums not being able to be built on 1.72 hectares, or it has to be 10 hectares. Like, I have no idea what the rules and regs are around that, but I don't know if you had a chance to read these questions and stuff, right?
I haven't looked at them, but I can address that question. The R7 zone, I mean, when you look at zoning bylaws, they're done at a time, they look at general standards and they put a zone together. 10 hectares is large for a condominium development, to be honest with you, and why it's 10 hectares in your bylaw, I don't know. But they're requesting something different. And your OP allows for the density they're proposing. Okay, so they're requesting the zone change to reflect something the official plan would permit. And they can do that. There's no magic to the 10 hectares for a vacant land condominium. I, as a planner of 35 years, couldn't tell you where 10 hectares would have come from. It's usually a density calculation based in your OP.
But whoever, well, obviously whoever is writing these questions must have done some research. So, you know, these leads to a lot of new questions tonight on what these questions are. And I realize, you know, the public is not allowed in here tonight to ask questions, but, you know, there's several in here. And like I say, we certainly haven't had time to understand them all. And, you know, we can only go by what professionals tell us that, you know, that's okay. We don't need 10 hectares. We can do it on 1.7. And so, you know, that concerns me, but the drainage is a big thing. It always has been here along that lake. So that somebody needs to certainly talk to somebody, the developer or whatever, so they clearly understand it's okay to have a drain pond in their development, but when they're gonna go down over that bluff or into that ravine, they better contact the conservation, find out what, because that could run into some pretty big money. There's lots of other stuff here in these questions, but until you guys have had a chance to read them and understand them, I know we all just got them. I can't come up with anything else other than they sure didn't go out, south side didn't go too much to reduce the lots. They reduced one lot. I thought they could have did a little bit in that down to the 21 that we were talking about here. And that's the other thing in these questions they talked about, when they looked at the area and the density, they they didn't look at the roads and they didn't look at the drainage pond. So that's something else to look at, like what area that took out of 1.7 hectares.
But we don't deduct those things for density. Okay, we don't, the only thing that's really deducted would be natural heritage areas and hazard areas. We take the whole gross area of a property and that's how we decide what density it's at. Okay, so this is at 15.7 as it sits today. And under the zoning bylaw, it would be approximately 21 units. The existing R5 zone, it doesn't permit a vacant land condo anyways, so it has to be amended to permit that.
Finally, you know, when we sent this back, there was concern in this room about the number of lots. And when we left, I thought we were kind of recommending, let's go down to 21. So they took one off. Like, what was the reason they only took one off?
Well, they feel that what they're proposing is in compliance with the official plan.
Right, I'll just stop you there. They feel that.
And-
But what the conversation that took place in this room was the size of the lots to fit the neighborhood out there. Not, right? This is the conversation that took place here, is that we wanted to see a little bigger lots. You know?
So if that's council's wish, then council can approve it subject to what council feels is appropriate. You can say, you know, we approve this subject to only 21 units being on the property. You know, council can direct what it wants for development through its approval. I mean, whether it will get appealed or not, a straight refusal certainly will get appealed. We know that. That's not a guess.
I could be wrong, Patty. But I thought that kind of was the direction that we'll see if you can get it reduced down to. I thought I could be
And
wrong about that.
And we did have that discussion. We did indicate that our council was looking for less density, but the developer does not want to reduce the density. They feel it's appropriate, given the official plan policies. So that leaves council to make the decision on what council wants there.
I think it's been some good comment, Counselor, good feedback from our planner. I would like to go to Ms. Jameson representing the planner who's representing the thing. I know you had your hand up for a comment, Ms. Jameson. First of all, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes, do you have a comment on that last dialogue from our counselor?
Yes, I do have just a couple of points that I'd like to raise here. So we did explore bringing the density down, and we looked at what 21 lots would look like on this property. That general calculation to meet the approximate density of the R5 zone, it did not take into consideration, you know, the area that was needed for roads or the stormwater management block. So when we actually did take a look at it, we were getting, I think it was 17 lots, which for our client, it made the development not viable at all. And then secondly, you know, I understand that the vacant land condominium is not, it's not a form that has been seen in Plympton-Wyoming very frequently, and certainly not in this area. However, I do want to point out that there are similarities in the proposal that we've put forward. Again, I recognize on paper, it does not look like the rest of the area, but we are proposing the same built form. You know, we're not proposing multi-unit dwellings. There's no townhouses here. There are single detached dwellings here that match the single detached dwellings in the rest of the neighborhood. The density, as you said, we calculated the density based on the requirements in the official plan for, I believe it was the county. And we meet the density based on that calculation in our current proposed development. And then also, I'd just like to point out that all of the units that we're proposing can accommodate amenities such as, you know, outdoor space. Each lot has an appropriate front and backyard to it. Parking can be accommodated on site. You know, if we add garages, those are similar characteristics to the other developments in the neighborhood. And again, the 26 lots meets the requirements as set out in the proposed draft bylaw prepared by town staff. And we are prepared to move forward with that. I'm here to answer any other questions that you may have as well. So please feel free to direct any my way. Thanks.
Hey, we won't, we'll let you go too far on that, Jameson. Counselor, will that answer all your questions?
Yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay, Counselor Bojan?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have some stuff here. The one big thing I took from that last meeting was we need a reason if we're going to say no. I'm not denying that that area is marked in the official plan, already in the county for, it's called a lakeshore development area for settlement. There's going to be houses there. That's why the last council would have changed it to R5. Because that's what it's been designated there for. But in my opinion, and in the official plan opinion, it's still not an urban center. It's definitely not an urban settlement area, and it's still the furthest north point of our municipality, far away from everything. So it was changed to R5 because it's identified for residential development. But I still think it needs to meet two things. Number one, it needs to meet the intent of the official plan. And number two, it needs to be appropriate for the location of the land. In our official plan, it says for lakeshore residential areas that we need to, higher density shall be discouraged in areas furthest from amenities north of Queen Street. So I don't think it meets the intent of our official plan. I think density is important. The province has made it clear that density is important. But I think we need, I said it last time and I'll say it again, we need to build in and then out. We shouldn't be putting our highest density zoning in the farthest north point and then building backwards. It's also important to remember this is going to set a precedent. That is just one small section of this area that's been designated for residential development. So I actually think that our official plan has things in there that says that this shouldn't be a high density area. And with that that's the reasoning that I'm sitting on for why I think it's appropriate to maintain R5, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. Counselor Basie?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, when I read this report, I have to admit, I was more than a little upset at our staff. I realized it wasn't your fault at all, it's our fault. Well, to me, it's a waste of time. Went back, it wasted a month, we talked about it for a couple hours. Airtime's now involved, and we dropped one lot when we went through all this last meeting. It's
In the staff's defense, they did make the argument that council really wants to see that.
I know, that's what I say, like after I got done, now well, not their fault, we're the ones that told them to do it. But again, as Councillor Bojan said, it's in the wrong spot. We have high density areas. We already got them zoned. We've already got them approved around Kamlaki, around Wyoming, not out in the middle of nowhere. To me, we bought some cheap property, and now we're gonna maximize our profits by rezoning it, and now we're gonna rezone it again, and we're gonna ask for 6 or 7 amendments to that zoning so we can make the houses fit. Even though it says we can have 26, it doesn't meet any of the other setbacks and frontage and all that other stuff, so we're gonna ask for permission to do that. And then they're gonna go away. They're gonna sell them, they're gonna be gone. Everybody else is gonna be left holding the bag on this. To me, we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, but we have to whittle the peg down to get it to fit because it's not quite what we want. And to me, there's no advantage to us doing this whatsoever. This does not make any sense to me. Say if it was it's like the one in Kamlaki we approved. Makes sense because it's in the urban area. It's not out in the middle of nowhere. This was a farmer's field. Still is really, but it's the only reason it got zoned because it's a little chunk of farmer's field that was useless. So I will not be voting for this.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Rodriguez?
Thank you. Well, because I put so much work into this and I know some of the counselors have said some of the things that I'm gonna say, but I'm still gonna read it. So I appreciate the statements made regarding the PPS, the county and municipal policies, but I'm having difficulty trying to justify why we need to jump through hoops for this zoning request. It isn't just one minor ask to consider, it is the sum of the asks that is creating concern. Is it realistic or necessary to support the zone change request? While I appreciate most issues are dealt with at the development stage, the two are intrinsically tied together to justify the need to rezone to begin with. The location, as stated, is within the farthest reach of our municipality. It is not the focus of growth, being a secondary settlement area. The surrounding community has minimal infrastructure and largely a rural cottage settlement area. There are no roads designed for higher volumes of traffic, nor designed for heavy construction traffic. There is no existing and or up-to-date drainage in the existing community. There are no curbs, no sidewalks. There will be no amenities offered within the proposed condo zoning. Nor are there any commercial hubs located close by within the municipality. There isn't any active transportation within reach for commuting as well. There is not sufficient land size to account for the climate and climate change, specifically, as stated in the PPS, in this area being adjacent to a Great Lake. Secondary settlements are reserved for infilling and rounding out of the existing built-up areas. The only thing we are rounding out here is a soybean field. The proposed drainage outlet is an ancient drainage pipe that ends at the top of the bank to Lake Huron and flows openly down an impervious clay bluff. It has eroded significantly in recent years, in part due to climate change. I don't believe that the Conservation Authority would allow any connection to this drain without significant improvements being made to it. It should also be noted that the majority of this outlet is located on a private property in Plympton Shores, and costs to improve the drain could not only be borne by the developer, but also the existing community and the town who would benefit from the drain, and this proposed zoning change and subsequent development application would trigger this to happen. We have ample land supply in primary settlement areas with an inventory surpassing 25 years. While the PPS provides guidance for growth in mixed-use housing, it fundamentally does not ignore where the focus of such growth and density should be. 113 of the PPS, it is in the interest of all communities to use land and resources wisely to promote efficient development patterns, protect resources, and promote green space. Ensure effective use of infrastructure and public service facilities and minimize unnecessary public expenditures. Also includes prepare for the impacts of changing climate and support active transportation. 1143 reads, when directing development in rural settlement areas in accordance with policy 113, planning authorities shall give consideration to rural characteristics, the scale of development, and the provision of appropriate service levels. So yes, mitigating everything about the application is possible through the development process, but I do not find it justified, necessary, or realistic. The PPS preamble guides us in this respect. Some of the policies refer to specific areas and features and can only be applied where these features or areas exist. Other policies refer to planning objectives that need to be considered in the context of the municipality or planning area as a whole. On page 23 of the planning justification report, it is noted that development is cost effective, makes efficient use of available infrastructure and municipal services within an existing settlement area boundary to minimize land consumption and servicing costs. PPS states, under 1662, municipal sewage services and municipal water services are the preferred form of servicing for settlement areas to support protection of the environment and minimize potential risk to human health and safety within settlement areas with existing municipal services and municipal water services. If it needs to use an outside source for water, an outside source for drainage, and an outside source for amenities, then this area is not developed enough in municipal services to justify the need, especially in the secondary settlement area as per the official plan. If the cost efficiency requires upgrades, drainage upgrades, servicing costs, service cost increases due to the location, and is wholly located within the highest residential tax bracket, then I don't think it is cost effective. If it is necessary to reduce the private road width, reduce site triangles, reduce lot sizes, asks for an approval of a large lot area reduction, and reduces green space through a plethora of exemptions of the zoning application, when there is no congestion to start with in the area, then we are solely accommodating the amount of land purchased for development, the site itself, and not the community as a whole, as is strongly guided for us to do in the PPS. The town, county, and province have all prioritized the development of affordable housing. The rezoning of the land and proposed development in this area simply will not achieve those goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Yeah.
I said.
Pretty well.
Okay, so is there any further discussion on this? Okay, so we have the motion that's on the floor. It was deferred. Defeated. Deferred.
You want me to, your worship?
Yes.
So if it's approved, it is approved at the revised lot numbers of 26 as recommended by planning staff, which is what the bylaw speaks to. If it is denied, it's denied. But then council will need to pass a motion that fits reasons of why it was denied. And we can craft that based on your direction.
Yes.
Can we approve this with the 20 lots? Do we have to bring a motion?
They can put 20 lots there already, the way it is.
That's what I'm saying. So
So then you would deny this bylaw, this proposed bylaw.
Suppose.
Can I just get clarification from staff? Why they? Because the way I read our official plan, the intent is density should not be north of Queen. So farthest north point of our municipality. So I'm just wondering what I'm missing in the intent of the OP, that this is aligned with the OP of putting a density increase. I might be missing something in the OP. I tried to comb through it. And that's how I found the line that says higher density should be discouraged north of Queen Street. So I'm just wondering if I'm missing something in the OP, because to me, that's the number one reason why I think we have rationale to deny it, because it's not aligned with the intent of our OP. So I'm just wondering if I'm missing something in that OP specifically.
So in my, I guess, planning perspective, the general intent of the OT of the official plan, yes, that line is there. However, there are other policies within the official plan that do, it's designated, it's zoned. At the end of the day, this isn't high density. Low density residential can be up to 25 units per residential hectare. I don't have my other staff report in front of me and to address specific policies, but it was my professional opinion that based on the official plan, again, yes, that's one policy, but the official plan is to ensure that policy decisions are across the whole board. You don't always just look at one policy and then immediately go, no. That just my professional planning opinion, I guess. I do think that through my recommendation, it is appropriate for the area. And I made that justification in my previous report as well. So yes, I understand council's concern. I understand where council is coming from. But again, this isn't high density. This amount of density would fall in the low density category of our official plan.
Motion.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for that. And I think the biggest problem for me here is it's zoned R5. We switch this to R7 with all these requirements. That's gonna set a domino effect here. There's a lot of land there that you could put very high density stuff. If we set the expectation here that we're okay with higher density zoning in that area. And I go back to, I know that was just one line in our official plan, but there's several lines in our official plan. Which predates me, but I think it was good that they put it in there where it constantly refers to infilling existing residential settlement in urban areas. Which I think is what every municipality should do, is infill what exists, build from the core. And continue as you need to. So just for me as a counselor, as an individual, I think we're in our rights. In the official plan, that it's clear that. I understand your professionals, and you're far more professional than I am when it comes to planning world. But as a Joe Blow like me, when I read our official plan and when I read through it a few times, that's the vibe I got, is we need to build from the core out, and it says avoid density in the northern point. That's where I'm at.
Okay, Councillor Wolvett.
Just ask a couple of questions here. If now under the R5, they can go ahead as long as they meet the guidelines there, right? We can't stop that. What we're talking about here is not moving to R7.
So through your worship, they can go through and develop on the R5. The R7 zone is our vacant plan of condominium zone. So if they did want to move forward with a vacant plan of condominium, it would ideally be in the R7 zone. But that doesn't mean they can't come back with and to decrease the density while still asking for that R7. So they could do a vacant plan of condominium.
So I just didn't quite get all that, sorry. So they could still go ahead under R5 and do their development with, say, 21 lots?
So through your worship, they can't do a vacant plan of condominium through the R5 zone, which is what they're proposing, but they could come forward and yes, develop on an R5, just not through that specific.
Through the condominium?
Yes.
Okay. Now, just a second question, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. If we turn this down, if, I'm just saying if, I don't know what we're gonna do here. Can they take this to the land tribunal and they can appeal it, and then we're.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's important for the council that's why I'm asking the question, to understand that. I don't know what would happen there. You're professionals, I don't know. So are we setting ourselves up for failure here? That's kind of what, before we go that far?
Deputy.
You can't make a decision on setting yourself up for failure. You go with what you think is right. Sorry, had to say that.
Oh, thank you, Madam Deputy.
And if-
You're welcome. Really appreciate that.
Okay, okay.
Just a
If
question.
council chooses to defer this,
Yes.
For defeat.
defeat my apologies. If council chooses to defeat this and the developer chooses to take us to OLT, because the planning department did support the recommendation, they would likely be called in as expert witnesses on the behalf of the developer.
Yes.
We would likely have to go out and hire a third-party planner to represent our opinion. From what I hear today, that opinion would be that the proposal does not meet the intent of the official plan. And then we'd have to find a planner to defend that perspective.
Yeah. That's all I'm asking the question for, just. Is that, can we be taken to the tribunal? And if we are, we are. Agree with the deputy mayor, so what? But just needed to be brought, I needed to understand, can that happen?
Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you. And I guess that is the frustrating part about it. But ultimately, is it not council who sets the direction for where development should occur? I mean, that's why we're sitting here.
Absolutely, but your official plan, your planners have reviewed the official plan and have noted that this meets the intent of the official plan. And your official plan is your overguiding document that sets that direction. And then it's broken down further by your zoning bylaw, and then that's what stage we're at here today. So if your official plan, when it was amended so many years ago, had taken this area outside the settlement area, had left it as, farmland, and the property owner of that time may have had a claim against the town for down designating their property. But if they didn't claim against the town for down designating the property would be agricultural and it could not be developed. So unfortunately, if we want to remove lands from the settlement area, the official plan amendment would have been the time to do that.
Okay, but this isn't about just being developed or not being developed. It's appropriate development. There are lots of statements we've referred to in the official plan, which support why we are saying what we are saying. So unfortunately, sometimes we disagree.
Agreed.
Matters.
And
But we
council
still-
Council does have the say in this situation. However, the provincial policy statement is the overguiding legislation. And if we act outside the provincial policy statement, the developers do have a claim. And they can present that claim through the Ontario Land Tribunal, which then can rule on whether council was correct in their interpretation or the planner was correct in their interpretation.
Council Bojan?
And to go back to that, though, we're not taking land supply away. We're keeping it residential. It's already been changed to R5. And the province is clear in their direction that municipalities need to increase density and housing supply. We're leading the charge in that in the county. We're increasing housing big time compared to some of our neighbors. The province is also specific that they to say municipalities can determine how and where they should target that densification. And I still go back to our official plan. I'm not saying the official plan can't be interpreted or not allow density in that area. I'm just saying when I read the official plan as a Joe Blow, it is clear that we should be focusing in certain areas. So it's not that you're not allowed to make a denser zoning in the north part of the municipality. It's just we're supposed to be strategic with where we put that. And in my opinion, again, just as a broken record, we're following the official plan by saying that's the wrong spot.
Yeah, and Min's planning has provided their planning opinion. Admin staff are simply noting that if you choose not to agree with the planner's opinion, it's your prerogative of council to do so, but we're highlighting the options that are available to the developer otherwise. We will have to justify our decision, likely through the OLT, which we will have to hire a planner for. I do not have enough planning background to say whether we'd be successful or not, but we would have to defend our opinion likely if they chose to take us to OLT, or they could choose to revise their proposal. That's up to them, which direction they take.
One more question.
Yes, Councilor Wolbett.
So, based on the last words, Adam just said revise their proposal. So maybe should we give an opportunity for them to be able to do that by deferring it
So
and see if they want to come back and even talk?
I think Clark, you have a.
Giving you a little break. They have been asked if they want to revise their proposal, and this is the proposal they're comfortable coming back with. We can't defer it and ask the same question again. They did reduce the one lot that as per the planner's recommendation, but they were asked, you know, what do you want to do? And this is what their application is.
To
Can't defer it again.
And to further that planning staff, when can the developer take us to OLT for non-decision?
We have to look that up.
There is a time frame.
We need to make, council needs to make a decision on this one way or the other. I mean, it is what it is, and if you don't like it and you have a reason to refuse it, then you know, that's your prerogative.
Okay, council, we've asked a lot of questions. It's been good conversation. This is a motion that I'll read again, and this is the one that we deferred, and we do have to come back with a motion on it right now. Moved by Councilor Van Claveren, seconded by Councilor Wolbett. Report by Randy Burke, planner, dated February 19th, 2024, regarding the resubmission of zoning bylaw amendment application 3 of 2023, affecting lands known as 0 Hillsborough Road, submitted by Southside Construction Management Limited. Be received in that bylaw 3 of 2023 being a bylaw to rezone subject property from residential -5 bracket R5 zone to site specific residential 7(1) bracket R7 1 zone. It has been read 3 times, finally passed, and the mayor and clerk authorized the bylaw accordingly. So clerk, if I'm correct, we cannot defer it. It either has to be carried or defeated.
Correct.
Okay. And all motions have to be in the positives or all, yes, Council Basie.
We have a recorded vote, please.
Yes.
So the motion is in the positive, so the motion is for approving as presented by your planners.
Correct.
Deputy
Everybody-
Mayor?
Everybody clear on that?
Would you put me to the bottom of the list, please? No. Can I talk this out with myself, or do I have to answer yay or nay right now? You know, like we're going against our planners' recommendations. That's the whole problem here. We really have to justify things when we go to the OLT. You know, we're going to go to the OLT. So, but I don't know. I think they should just. We tried to cooperate at the last meeting and, nay. Let's talk it out.
That's fine.
I'm glad I could listen.
Counselor Van Claveren,
No.
Counselor Vasey.
No.
Counselor Bojan.
No.
Counselor Wolvet.
Can I just think this over for?
You wanna talk to me?
As a no, you don't want to think it over, or no to the vote, sir?
It's a no.
And Counselor Rodriguez.
No. Okay, that motion is defeated.
Council has to give a reason of why they defeated that, so that when we go to.
Yeah, that was my one. Your whole.
So,
Yep, here's how you read.
I cannot, put down my thoughts. I'm not counsel. I did draft the beginning of a motion because we still have to receive Randy's report. This is what they're applying for. And then I can fill in that this be denied because council feels.
Not.
Mr. Bowden.
I
Yes.
don't know if you want a list or.
Several items out of the official plan that.
My opinion, my biggest thing was just it doesn't align with the intent of our official plan, which a rezoning application has to do.
There's several sections of the official plan that could be referred to, but can we have to write them all?
Helps.
You have to have something at the board. I can't tell you which ones to choose or not choose or how many to put or not put, like you. Right, I'm hearing it's the density, the concerns of the community that doesn't meet the intent of the official plan. There's.
Section 5.2, the official plan.
It doesn't meet density for sure.
There's
Madam.
Section 2 of the 2 of the official plan.
5.2 to what, sorry, Counselor Bojan?
Section 2B,
2B, thank you.
8C. These are all, I'm just control F-ing the word infill in our official plan here because that's, and it's,
And don't forget that Queen Street.
the Queen Street was the first one I listed, yeah.
Sorry, because that. Was talking.
Would you quote the,
So just for clarity, 5.2, the first one I mentioned, it says a lakeshore residential area designation includes a variety of communities and different characters and densities. New development shall generally not exceed 12.5 units per residential hectare. Densities of up to 20 units per net residential hectare, however, may be permitted in order to maintain neighborhood character, assist in infill development or redevelopment, especially redevelopment that would result in public roads. Higher densities shall be discouraged in areas furthest from amenities north of Queen Street.
It's 5.2.
That is 5.2. And then 18C. New construction and or infilling should be compatible with surrounding buildings and streetscapes by being of the same height with orientation of adjacent buildings, being of similar setback, and using similarly proportioned windows, doors, and roof shape. I think that's relevant as well.
That was 18C of the official plan.
Sorry, can you say that again?
18C.
Sorry, 5.2 and 18C.
We have 5.2 and 18C.
so
That 18 speed is not the full, so it's 18.1.
Sorry.
18.1. C?
18C.
Yeah.
Another 18.
18.1, 18C.
Yeah, so it's under 18.1 cultural heritage, and then it's 18C.
Okay, so those are the two first ones.
Dave Rodriguez has some.
The density or the characteristics or.
Did you refer to the settlement area? That the developer also refers to.
So that's in the county official plan, I think what you're referring to, the secondary settlement area.
Correct.
We can only speak to our own official plan.
I think we should speak to all three. If this moves to the OLT, it's going to be based on provincial. See, can we not speak to all three
Sure.
as our guidance?
Sure.
So.
The application does not meet the provincial policy statement.
Well, we're at county. Mr. Bojan, you were speaking to all the Wyoming.
LPW. It was mainly that north. We wanted.
So I don't know. Lisa, were you looking that up?
Yeah, I can locate that.
So on the provincial.
So for the county one, I believe you're referring to the 3.2.12 where they're saying that the municipal services that it could be considered a urban.
So it states that secondary settlement is not the focus.
Yes, this one says, so the 3.2.12 and the county official plan says the plan recognizes that the level. Oh, this is what we were using to. That a secondary settlement can be designated as urban settlement if they're full services. You were commenting on that last.
Yeah, so in that same paragraph. It speaks to.
Settlement is designated as such only because of lack of full services. The municipality sanitary services are provides for adoption of this plan. The policies for an urban settlement area apply to settlement without the county official plan. My challenge with that one is from a technical perspective, they have services.
Not the statement.
That was three, sorry, I must have missed it.
Okay,
I
so,
think she's not referring to the statement.
so I think she's actually wanting 3.2.4 in the county official plan. It states secondary settlements are existing built up areas that are not to be the focus of growth. This is due to partial surfacing, a limited variety of land uses and or proximity to urban centers or settlements that are to be the focuses of growth.
Yes, that's exactly. Thank you. Did you get that number?
I just have to white out because we backtracked, so if you give me a second. 2.4 of the county official plan.
Yes.
And of the PPS, we have 1 and 3. Preamble of the PPS.
PPS.
No?
No.
PPS and building strong, healthy communities.
Their section number.
There is no. It's part of the.
Preamble?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote preamble.
Okay.
Yep.
And 1.6.62.
1.6.2.
Oh, sorry, 1.6.
Yep.
Or 1, sorry, 1.6.
Yeah.
0.6.2.
That's it for the PPS.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
No, 1.6.
6.2. Exists.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that one, because it just says municipal sewage services and municipal water services are the preferred form of servicing for settlement areas, which is what the example is for this condominium.
Yeah, so it backs up. So specifically, it speaks to within settlement areas with existing municipal services.
I think that is a losing argument as
I don't think
it's an
so.
existing settlement area with existing services. So
No, they're not adequate.
that's an engineering opinion that I don't think we could win on. Adequate is a matter of opinion, and if the developer is willing to spend the money, it can be made adequate quite easily. If they had to bring a new line up from Lakeshore Road, they could. They had to go through the Drainage Act to get an access out to the lake, they could. If they had to build a pumping station with a retention time to hold back the sewage to ensure that it doesn't overwhelm our downstream sewage, they could. So that would be a hard argument to win, I would think.
You're right, it could, but that wasn't what was presented to us, so that's why I made the statement. But thank you.
So am I removing that second one?
I don't.
It's up to council as a whole, but I would suggest that would be not the best argument to make.
Any other inclusions?
Councilor Bojan?
Now that I have some time there, most of what I'm pulling from is under 4.1 of official plan, which is the residential section. So in addition to what I already said, there's a couple more that I'd like to draw attention to. 4.1.1.1. The primary uses permitted in residential areas will be for residential dwelling units. Various types of dwellings will be included, with preference being given to the locating of similar densities of development together. 4.1.1.4. The primary residential uses permitted within residential areas are low density housing types, including single detached dwellings. So speaking to that first one, which leads into 4.1.1.8. Residential intensification in areas of existing development that have sufficient servicing capacity. So I would argue this is not existing development with efficient municipal services. 4.1.1.9. Intensification, including infill development and redevelopment, in residential areas may be undertaken either by means of a plan of subdivision, plan of condominium, or where neither subdivision nor condominium is appropriate by consent, provided the means selected is intended to make the most efficient use of municipal services. Such development may also be subject to a site control. Redevelopment of lands to create a higher residential densities or to remove existing obsolete uses will be encouraged if such redevelopment is compatible with the existing physical character and pattern of surrounding development. I would argue we're not meeting that at all. 4.1.1.13, in existing residential areas, an increase in residential density may be considered where the scale and physical character of a new or renovated residential dwelling units are compatible with the surrounding area and where municipal and community services are adequate. We don't have any community services out there. So I would like to pull those ones as well.
Can I just repeat those back to you, Councilor?
Sorry, we're been put on the spot. I didn't know we had.
Yeah, I didn't
We had to
know
have our
we
legal
were-
fight right here, so.
Yeah, I believe the planners justified last meeting that we need to justify this. So the additional ones you added was 4.1.1.1.
Yeah.
4.1.1.4.
Yeah.
4.1.1.8.
Yeah.
4.1.19.
Yeah.
4.1.113.
Correct.
Anything else?
I can probably find more, but I got no time. I
Um,
wanna go home at some point.
if you want to include something general, that's not speaking specifically to those policies, it's
Did I state?
concerns with density or concerns with character of the neighborhood or whatever.
I think that covers
It covers it all.
most of council's concerns.
To back up, the provincial policy, did I, note 1.1.3.2?
I have 1.1.3. So is that the whole section or would you like to be more?
Did we miss a number?
Maybe? The preamble and section 1.1.3 of the provincial policy statement.
Yeah, I did miss them. But it's probably this. It's probably the 1.1.3.1. 1.1.3.2. And
So I think, again, this,
I find them supportive of Councillor Bojan's statements.
so, excuse me, that was 1.1.3.1 for your first one? So that simply says settlement area shall be the focus of the growth and development. This is a settlement area.
I'm sorry.
So, and then
Simple statement, wasn't it?
1.3 lands and uses patterns within settlement area shall be based on densities and mixes of land use, which efficient use of land and resources are appropriate for the efficient use infrastructure and public services. Facilities which are planned or available to avoid the need of their unjustified and uneconomical expansion, minimize negative impacts of air quality, climate change, and promote energy efficiency, prepare for the impacts of changing climate, support active transportation, are transit supportive where transit is planned, exist, or may be developed, and are rate supportive.
Yeah. Obviously, all the statements.
So that would be 1.1.3.2 A through G.
But I'm taking out the 1.1.3.1, right?
Correct, that will not work. I think the clerk might have ran out of space.
I can turn it over if you want. Oh,
Anything
you
else?
want me to read this mess?
Please. We need to move on.
You won't be able to read. Oh, I need a mover and seconder, actually.
Moved by
Daisy.
Daisy, second by McEwen.
Okay, that the report by Randy Burke, planner dated February 19th regarding the resubmission of zoning bylaw amendment application 3 of 2023 affecting lands known as 0 Hillsborough Road, submitted by Southside Construction Management Limited be received, and that the zoning bylaw amendment application to rezone the subject property from residential R5 zone to a site-specific residential 7(1) R7(1) zone be denied, as council feels the application does not meet section 5.2, 18.1, 18.1C, 4.1.1.1, 4.1.14, 4.1.1.8, 4.1.1.9, 4.1.1.13 of the official plan. The application does not meet section 3.2.4 of the county official plan. The application does not meet the preamble section and 1.1.3.2 A through G of the provincial policy statement.
Is that acceptable, just to use the numbers that, rather than the, literary part?
I would think so, rather than rewriting out all.
I know.
It refers to those sections.
Okay.
Yep.
Council Bowden.
I don't know the process, but can we not just say it doesn't align with the official plan? And then the planners that if this goes all the way through, they find even more? So can't we just leave it high level and say it doesn't align with the official plan? Cause I feel like we're just pigeonholing, cause there might be
That's
some.
what I had at the beginning and whited it out.
That's what I
Well, we
was
were-
asking.
we were-
I
I
can't
thought we were
say.
asked to be specific. That's why we started pulling that out.
Yeah.
Sorry, I meant specific as in like, is it a density thing? Is it an official plan thing? Is it a,
Oh.
like,
That would be way easier.
yeah. But then you got really specific and I thought you really wanted it in there, so I wasn't gonna tell you no.
We thought we
I thought we
had
were
to
No.
be.
specific.
So.
Can we put something just not limited,
Yes,
like
not
leave it
limited to.
open-ended so that,
Can we just say that it's, used
For
in
example.
general terms?
Yes, you
and-
could probably, instead of having to clerk rewrite that whole thing, does not meet
The intent of the official plan, which
including
is-
but not limited to sections.
Can we add in our opinion?
I don't know if there's room on the page.
Just say in Nettie's opinion.
Oh, boy, Nettie's opinion, are you? Boy.
It wasn't Nettie's way.
Yeah.
So I've added that the application does not meet the intent of the official plan, including but not limited to.
Perfect.
Okay, you can do the vote.
All right, moved by Councillor Vacy, seconded by Deputy Mayor McEwen. You've heard what the clerk has just read to us. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, council, we're gonna have to move this along. We got 25 minutes and we do need to go in camera A couple of very important things. So I would ask you to keep your questions down to a bare minimum, please, as we move this along. 6.1, we have a motion by Deputy Mayor McEwen, seconded by by Councilor Wolvett, that the report by Patty Richardson, Senior Planner, dated February 19th, 2024, regarding Professional Group Incorporated Trails End Subdivision Assumption be received, and that bylaw 20 of 2024 be approved by council and taken as having been read 3 times, finally passed, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to set aside said bylaw accordingly. It's Richardson is here. Any questions for the report, beginning on my right? Any questions? On my left, any questions? Deputy?
Just one that, don't you wish you had put your report in first?
I tried that, but I was denied.
I owe her a bottle.
I think that's all. I mean, other than like, there is, behind those lots, there is an access onto Fleming Road. Is that gonna stay there?
Well, until they develop the subdivision, once they
Okay.
develop the subdivision, the access will be removed.
All right, that's the only question.
Okay, anything further? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? There. Richardson. Okay, we're gonna go to item 7, bylaws. Clerk, anything under this one? Okay, correspondence, item 8. Clerk, anything new that's been added?
Respondent action required.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to item number 9.1, correspondence. A motion by Councilor Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Vaizey, that correspondence items A to C relating to recommended reading and routine approval and information items not otherwise addressed by resolution be noted as received by the Plympton-Wyoming Council and filed accordingly. A to C. Any questions on my left? Concerns? Am I right? Hearing none. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, let's go to new business, beginning on my left. Councilor Wolvett.
The only thing I would question, back to the short-term rental, or we need to make a motion that we're just gonna go to registration in the future, not a bylaw.
Thank you. Your worship, you're correct. No one gave that direction after that subject. So if you guys want to do that, I need that direction.
Thought that's kind of what we talked about, that we'd go just with registration and bylaw stuff that we corrected for future consideration later.
Use it now.
Yes.
Is that?
The registration we could use this year, but the rest of it's gonna be.
Yeah, that's what but I
We can
thought
put a
I'd.
plan in place. We can ask people to follow it. We will have no mechanism to find them. We could take them to court and have a court order issued against them as it sits once it's passed by a bylaw. We cannot lay set fines until after the Governor General or Governor Attorney General has approved. So we could implement. It just, our teeth is much lessened because the only way to enforce it would be through the courts.
It would just be a registration bylaw. We're just asking for their contact information that they register.
I was speaking
That is it.
actual short-term rental bylaw.
Yes, but what Bob's asking for to kind of run concurrently would only get us their like, it's not gonna give us much.
I thought that's what we talked
That's up
about.
to you guys to tell me. if you
Yeah, it's
want
up
that
to.
motion.
We can try to move along the short-term rental bylaw as quickly as possible, so at least you can get it started for registration. Or concurrently, we can run the registration bylaw at the
I
same
didn't
time.
think we approved any bylaw. Not that I'm.
Next steps.
But we're gonna get it along as quickly as possible, so
We're
you
gonna
can
get
choose
information
or
and
not to approve.
just registration this year only and sometime. I better get that clarified because
That was not the intent. The
Okay, well,
intent
I
is to
didn't-
ask us to bring a bylaw back to you to vet. Once you've vetted it, it'll come back with the zoning bylaw amendment, an OP amendment, where you can hear public consultation, and then the meeting following, you'd get to approve the bylaw if you so choose. So you approved it bylaw in principle. We will bring back another bylaw for you to review again and approve it in principle, which then will be reviewed by the public as part of the public meeting, for the OPA ZBA, and then you would have an opportunity after the public meeting to pass the bylaw as a whole. So we can concurrently run a registration program at the same time. However, it doesn't mean the bylaw is not enforced unless you didn't want it to become enforced until January 1st. You can approve it. Once it's approved in a future date, not today. Once it's approved, it becomes required But our only enforcement is through the courts until the set fines are approved by the Governor General, or by the Attorney General. So,
Councilor Bolton?
Yeah, because even if we have passed that bylaw today, I would have low confidence that the courts would even approve our set fines in time for May or June or July. So I think it's important to, I see it as two phases. I see it as phase one is the register. You have to register as soon as we're ready and have that bylaw in place. Bylaw staff can still put an order to comply on that door of that short-term rental and hammer it into that front door that they have to register or they get summoned to the courts. It's still an option when you do that registration bylaw. And then again, that just gives us time that, hey, we're doing something, we can track some data here. And we're also working on phase two, which is the actual framework. So that's what I would suggest.
I hate to prolong the conversation, but did we set any fines for not adhering to the registration?
you endorse them in principle, however, you have not approved any.
No,
Not approved.
he's talking about registration. We don't even have a
Registration.
for registration.
You can't do set fines for registration, you're just, you're not gonna, you're in the same spot as the other bylaw.
Then I would just make the motion that we proceed with registration.
Do you mean a fine or a fee?
No, just registration. Fines we haven't, you can't set them yet, right?
Just, that'll be just the boilerplate up to $50,000 or set by.
Yeah.
Not complying with an order to.
The
comply.
registration bylaw will buy you 3 months of registration documents. It'll give us 3 months, 3 to 4 months a head start. Unless we keep kicking the can down the road on the actual licensing bylaw.
So if I heard correct, Councilor Wilbert would like to move a motion to direct staff to prepare a short-term rental registration bylaw for their consideration. Seconder?
Councilor Rodriguez. Motion by Councilor Willett, seconded by Councilor Rodriguez, that staff be directed or prepare a short-term rental registration bylaw for consideration. All those in favor? Carried.
All I have, sir.
Anything else, Councilor Willett?
No, sir.
Councilor Van Claveren?
No, thank you, sir.
Deputy?
No, nothing.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Even if I did, I won't dare.
Thank you.
Wise woman, Chris.
Yeah.
Councilor Vacy?
Nothing.
Councilor Bolton?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, I have nothing under new business under planning, so we'll go to a closed session. I have a motion by Councilor Van Claveren, seconded by Deputy Mayor McEwen. The council move into an in-camera meeting of council pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001, was amended for the following reasons. Item A, solicitor-client privilege, section 239, bracket 2, bracket F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. All those in favor? Carried. For those with us, I'm sorry, but we're going in camera. We'll probably be back at 9 o'clock to close the meeting down. Thank you very much for your patience and for staying with us this evening.